Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror and detail, the realm where the shadows whisper ancient secrets and nightmares come to life. I am your guide through the darkness, and on this channel, we delve into the spine-chilling world of Wendigo horror stories that will send shivers down your spine. First story. It followed me from Seattle. I hope it didn't follow me back. I'm still freaking the fuck out over what happened this last weekend. I think it's still out there. I fucking hope so. This all began a few months ago when I moved here from Wenatchee in eastern Washington to attend a university. I recently turned 21, but I didn't have any friends around to celebrate, so I did the next best thing. Rolled a blunt and watched some shit on Hulu. I'm really living the life here, I know. Undeclared major. Recreational weed. Living off my savings. And finally no more parents nagging at my door to do something with my life. Or at least so I thought. The first time I heard it, I thought it was paranoia. I smoke a ton of pot, and living in a new city doesn't help either. People say I live in the party area of downtown. Belltown, I think they call it. So far, it just seems like an endless parade of brothers and drug-addled street kids skulking at all times of the night, and to be honest, it doesn't really bother me that much. I drown that shit out with headphones anyway. I much prefer it to that cold, deafening silence. The silence so strong you start realizing just how bad your tinnitus actually is. A silence that conjures nightmare creatures from the deepest reaches of your primitive mind to explain the occasional thud and thunk of a settling house. It was in that silence that I heard it. I was grinding some bud for my third bowl of the night when I noticed the empty quiet that filled the space outside of my apartment. I'm on the ground floor, so I'm basically used to all types of yelling, singing, arguing, and fighting when the sun goes down. But not now. Not tonight. There was nothing. Scratch. 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 It came from the window in my kitchen. It's in quotes because it's literally 2 burners and a mini fridge with a microwave on top. Despite what think about stoner stereotypes, I'm pretty fucking immaculate when it comes to cleaning too. That's why I was puzzled when I investigated the sound. Small amounts of dirt speckled across the small excuse for a counter under the window. The window was closed. I cleaned off the counter and figured I was too high to remember making that mess earlier. Fear was overcome by a wave of relaxation when I hit my pipe. Purple Kush. Family Guy eased me into a coma, and by the morning I didn't even bother thinking about the noise from the night before. But from then on, it kept happening. Night after night after night. The same 3. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Always at different times, too. 1 o'clock, 2:45. 1:37, 3:40. There wasn't really a pattern to it, just the same weird interval of 9 scratches. It seemed to be getting faster every time. I just started assuming it was someone fucking with me. Maybe some guys picked a place to fuck with every night after they left the bar, and I just happened to get lucky. This thought calmed me down, and I was eventually convinced that this was all it was. I still didn't have any friends here, and with the cold snap and rain, I didn't really feel like going out and making any yet. The school quarter was almost over, and I noticed that I wasn't getting enough sleep. The scratching was getting louder now, and joke or not, I had to get some rest before finals week. One of my classmates suggested going camping. She even offered to let me borrow her tent and sleeping bag. Supposedly, getting out of the city once in a while and being in nature helps calm the mind. Kinda hippie sounding, but I was stoned when she suggested it. I took up the offer and made a reservation at a campground near Mt. Rainier for this past weekend. I'd rather not say which one because it might still be there waiting for someone. The girl from my class met me at a Starbucks downtown and gave me her camping gear. I really appreciated the gesture, but I'm not sure if my high-as-fuck monotone voice and glossy red eyes conveyed any evidence of that. Didn't matter anyway. I packed a couple grams of bud, my pipe, and my old Nikon SLR. I got inspired by all the Milky Way pictures people post on the internet, and sleep or not, that was my mission now. The trip out to the park was long, and boring. Saw maybe one gas station for 20 miles, and I may have eaten my snacks on the way there. I stopped there to re-up the trail mix and Cliff Bars and Muscle Milks before I continued on my way. The clerk looked Native American. Old too. He had this weird look in his eyes when I approached him, as if he was about to say something, but cut himself off and silently rang up my tasty treats. It was his eyes, though, that bothered me. He had this look of sympathy and dread and sadness, all mulled into one. Maybe I was analyzing the situation too hard, but it seemed like he wanted to tell me something. Whatever, though. I had a galaxy to photograph. The campsite was okay. I pitched the tent fast even though some of the poles were missing and didn't snap all the way. I took a hit off my pipe and looked up at the sky, SLR in hand ready to snap that award-winning Milky Way shot. Clouds. Nothing but a fucking gray sky. Too tired to drive. I got in the tent and listened to a podcast from my phone speakers. I don't remember when I fell asleep, but I did. Eventually. And then I woke up. Atch, scratch, scratch. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It was scratching on the fucking tent. Get the fuck off my tent, douchebags. And again, I was met with that cold silence. No one responded. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I was somewhat paralyzed from fear, but in that brief moment I checked my phone to make sure I wasn't dreaming. I refreshed a news app and saw it update in real time. Kind of a dumb way to check that everything is okay, but I guess it doesn't matter. WHE. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Scratch-a-wayak. All around the tent, I heard it scratching and scratching to a point where I thought I was just going insane. My heart pounded out of my chest, and my anxiety was at the highest point it's ever been my entire life. Each passing moment of silence felt like another calm to a storm of terror. The scratching in my imagination. I couldn't get out of the tent. I couldn't speak. I waited and waited. It continued, scratching faster and faster, and suddenly I heard something. Why? Silence. Scratching. T-in-it. The way it spoke. Definitely not normal sounding for a person. The fact I was even questioning the humanity in its voice was reason enough to piss myself. Which I did. For a grown-ass man, I was on the verge of tears. This was too much. I grabbed my car keys and phone and weed and unzipped the front flap. I bolted to the car, not looking back as I ran. The keys fumbled around the lock, and I could hear something behind me. Turning? It sounded huge, but it sounded like it was on 2 feet. The key slid in, and that's when I remembered I had a clicker. Moment of dumb realization and that I was still relatively high. Got the ignition started, turned the high beams on, and reversed out of my spot to hightail it out of the campground. Nothing in front of me, but I checked behind. Perhaps reflexively, I peeked the rearview mirror before hitting the gas only to see 2 long, hair-covered legs illuminated by my brake taillights, making giant strides toward my rear window. I stomped on the pedal. Whatever it was tried to catch up to me, but it gave up after I approached about 60 miles per hour. The drive back was a relief, and a part of me still could not believe what happened. When I got home, it was already morning. The sun was up, and I could see people staggering back from bars and nightclubs. It was a small moment of relief. I felt a little back to normal. until I got out of the car to get the supplies. Huge gashes were scratched into the window and door, and my tailpipe was slightly bent. At least I'm not crazy, I thought. I lifted up the rear hatch and forgot that I abandoned that girl's camping gear out near Mt. Rainier. My stomach dropped. There's no way she would believe my story. But that's when I noticed something else in the back seat of my car. Dirt. Small amounts of it speckled across the floor and seats. Update 4:53 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's back. Second story. The Wendigo is near. This is a story which happened to me and my friend a few years back. I work in a national park as a park ranger. When my life was relatively normal, I had just landed a job at a national park. Life was good as I was working with my buddy Rob. The second day was strange. We found bear traps on the ground. We never put them there. Other than that, another day in paradise. But throughout the night, I swear I heard a loud screech coming from the woods near my watchtower. I looked and saw nothing. I just shrugged it off after a little while. As of lately, we have been finding small animal corpses around the woods. This is normal since we have bears all over. It's just that these marks were too big to belong to a bear. What's even weirder is we found a tooth inside of a bloody deer. This tooth was too huge and sharp to belong to a bear. I think we have a new animal in these woods. Today we found a bear, hanging from a tree and gutted. I nearly threw up. No animal in the park could do this. Boss told us from now on to stay at the watchtowers. I kept being reassured that everything would be fine, but at this point I just couldn't be too sure anymore. Lately the screeches have been more frequent. I'm having trouble focusing. When I was younger, I was told of a creature that fed off people and animals. It could also mimic voices. It was called a Wendigo. Of course, I don't believe in that paranormal crap, but something was taking out animals throughout the park. I swear I heard Rob call me from outside of my watchtower. He yelled, "Hey Trent, you have got to come see this." I nearly left, but I just felt that his voice was off, nearly distorted. I looked out of my watchtower to see Rob, his insides dangling in the breeze. My boss ruled this out as an accident. That still didn't stop the police from questioning me. I know I heard his voice. I saw something in the woods. Let me explain. This creature I saw had huge antlers, an animal skull as a mask, and it was over 11 feet tall. The night began normally, until the screeches began again. I looked down, only to see this creature, eating my boss's lifeless body. I got a good look at it before it ran off and out of sight. The police have been very suspicious of me lately. How could they not be? Both of the people I worked with are dead. I tried to explain what I saw to the police. Of course, nobody believed me. It all led to me being terminated. I've decided I'm not going to let this creature ruin my life. I have done research on this Wendigo. I plan to break into the park tonight. I will end this, I must. I'm in the park. I hear the screeches and I am following them. I hear the voices of my boss and Rob. They are telling me that they are okay, and I should come meet them by my watchtower. I know from my research that the Wendigo creature is really good at tricking people. I just kept wandering around the park. I was wondering until I heard my mother's voice. She died when I was 6. My instincts told me no, but I had missed her so much. Don't worry, Mom. I'm coming. Third story. Sinister beings in the Oklahoma forests. I'm so excited to see Mom. My daughter exclaimed. I know you are Honey. Come on now, get in the car. To give you all a little backstory, my name is Michael. My wife divorced me 2 years ago due to me having a crippling drug addiction. Over the course of these 2 years, I became a better person. I stopped taking drugs and hanging out with my old pals, all in the hopes that my wife will come back to me one day. That day never came. One day, I got a call from my ex saying that my daughter missed me and really wanted to see me. After all, You can't keep a child from seeing their own father. I drove 4 hours to Springfield to pick her up and went back home. She stayed with me for 2 weeks. We went to the arcade, the movies, her favorite restaurant, and I even bought her a few dolls here and there. Anyways, the 2 weeks pass by quickly, and it's time to take her back to her mother. You sure you got everything you need? Sweetie, this'll be a long drive. Yes, Dad. Can we go now? Of course we can. I started my car and began driving. I lived in Oklahoma City, and my ex lived in Springfield, Missouri. It's a 4-hour-long drive that involves going through the Oklahoma Ancient Forest, which is where we encountered them. Hey, Dad, look. Buzz, 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 buzz. Oh, hey, your mother is calling. I picked up the phone and accepted the call. Hello, Michael. So how's Haley? Did she have fun? Yeah, she's alright. We went to movies, the arcade. I even bought her some new toys. Can I talk to her? Haley here. Your mother wants to talk to you. Hi, sweetie. Did you have F? Dad, watch out.
Barack Squelling bang.
Hello? Hello? Haley? Michael? We crashed the car. I passed out. The last thing I heard was my ex's worried voice over the phone. I woke up in my house. I was arguing with Samantha. Please, Michael. Please. Go to rehab, Michael. You have to stop, please. You have to stop for the sake of our little Haley. Please listen to me. I can't. I tried. Then I can't be with you, Michael. I want a divorce. No, Samantha. Baby, please. I'm trying. Dad. Dad, wake up. Dad. Wow, what happened? We crashed into an elk, Dad. Oh my God. Oh God. Haley, are you hurt, sweetie? Only a little. Is the elk still alive? Yes, Dad. I think it's hurt. I grabbed my pistol out of the glove box and got out of the car. I saw the elk, covered in blood and barely breathing. Poor thing. Oh, you poor, dumb animal. Haley, close your eyes.
Bang.
Dad, why did you shoot it? To put it out of its misery. I moved the elk out of the road and got back in the car. I pressed the gas pedal, but the car didn't move. You gotta be kidding me. I went out of the car and popped the hood open. The engine seemed okay. As I was opening the car door, I heard tree branches rustling and something rapidly approaching me. Fearing for the worst, I turned around and aimed my pistol in the direction of the sound with my finger on the trigger. Suddenly, the noise stopped. I sighed a sigh of relief. Maybe it was just a wild animal? Amidst all the chaos, I didn't seem to notice that Haley didn't make a noise as all that happened. I turned around to find a broken windshield, and Haley nowhere to be found. Haley, where are you, sweetie? Haley. I took a flashlight and an extra round of ammunition out of the glove box. I put the magazine in my pocket, turned on the flashlight, and began frantically looking for my daughter. Eventually, I saw the beam from my flashlight hit something. Haley? I said in a distraught voice. Haley, is that you? I got no response. I decided to keep on walking to whatever the thing was until its appearance became more clear as I approached. It was a girl, all right, but not Haley. She looked much older, maybe 15 or 16. She was wearing a dirty white hospital gown, and her flesh seemed to be rotting. When I got close enough to clearly see the side of her head, I knew that there was no way in hell that thing was human. I slowly turned around and tried to walk back, but it was too late. It let out an ear-piercing demonic screech that I cannot describe. As I heard it rapidly approaching me, I knew that running was no good. I aimed my gun and fired half the mag at it until it finally collapsed. Thoughts started rushing through my brain. Did these things take Haley? What if they killed her? She's probably shivering out of fear right now. As my brain was processing what just happened, I heard a loud scream coming from the forest. Aha! Haley! Oh my God, that's Haley! I ran as fast as I could in that direction. I ignored the pentagrams and Wendigo skulls hung up on the trees and kept on running towards the direction of the noise, pistol in hand. Suddenly, the fog cleared. The light of the midnight moon shined through the forest. The joy I felt was soon replaced by dread as I saw strange beings around me. There were at least 5 of them. One seemed to look like a Wendigo. The other had the body of a horse and the torso of a human. The only thing I could say about the third one was that he had a tall, slender humanoid body, wore a maroon hoodie with a black cape, and carried a strange object in his hand. The fourth one was a fat humanoid figure. In his hand was a rotting, half-eaten corpse of a cat. The fifth one was an old woman. She was tall, very tall. She wore a black dress and had black paint under her eyes. As I stood in the middle of those creatures, I knew I was hopeless. There's no way the 10 bullets I had left would take out those hideous things. I blinked and saw them all standing not 5 inches away from me. I started shivering, thinking about how gruesome my death will be. They all started chanting something in some sort of language I could not describe. I felt hopeless until the old woman raised her hand, and I saw Haley. Haley! Dad? Dad, help. Let us go. What do you want from us? Why are you doing this to us? Let us go. The old woman grabbed Haley and gave her to the fat one. I saw my daughter screaming her lungs out as the thing bit off her limbs one by one. No, leave her alone. Haley! It sounded like the woman was laughing. Eventually, my daughter's corpse was dropped right in front of me. So you killed her. Now kill me. Kill me. Kill me too. They started to walk away. This was sent to me by an anonymous Reddit user on the 17th of May. I was scrolling through Reddit, not a day later, when I found a post saying the dead body of a man was found in the Oklahoma ancient forest. His death was determined to be suicide via gunshot to the head. Fourth story. I nearly escaped a Wendigo, at the cost of both of my parents. I kept this story a secret my whole life. I'm 22 now. This happened more than a decade ago, and I still have clear and vivid memories of this day. I miss my parents so much and wish I never did what I did that afternoon. I had a nice family. I had a mom, a dad, and a sister, but yet my parents are the ones I miss most. We all lived in a nice cozy cabin in Alaska, United States, near a dense and long-stretched forest. Usually my parents would take walks just to admire the beautiful snow and cold weather. My dad was a lumberjack and my mom was a normal housewife. We had such a perfect life before the incident happened. One morning I woke up to my sister yelling at my parents because she hated living here. I gave her the benefit of the doubt because she was 19 years old and had her own car but no friends due to us being isolated for miles. This argument went on for 20 minutes before I heard a door shut very loudly. I rushed downstairs to see what happened, and my mom was crying because my sister had left our family to move more in the city in a different state. My dad still had to hear this news due to him, still cutting trees into smaller pieces out back. I rushed outside and I saw my sister. She wasn't actually going to the car, but instead going into the forest. I knew it. My kind sister would never leave us. I decided to follow her and see what she was up to. I quickly put on my jacket, boots, gloves, and snow pants and went into the forest. As soon as I went outside, I realized only one car was in front of our house. It seemed weird, but I just thought Dad had to run to the store and do a few errands. So I ran towards where I last saw my sister. Once I was inside the forest, I realized it stretched longer than I thought it would, and weirdly enough, there was a path leading straight. I thought my dad cut these trees due to me being little and not really knowing much about lumberjacks. I went on, and when I turned back, I could still see the house. I knew I would be safe. I would just plead with my sister not to leave, and everything would be all right. I wish it was that easy. I walked for what seemed like forever when I heard a familiar voice. My sister, I thought, and started running towards that voice, but came to a stop. In front of me were long, white, and clean bones shaped like an old Native American roof. There was one thing that stood out with those bones. My sister's pink and gold necklace, which had her name on it. I read it, and it was her name. Now I was getting scared. I turned around to see my house nowhere. I was lost. I shouted, "Mom, Dad," but nobody came. I ran in what seemed like a loop for 5 minutes when I heard footsteps. The footsteps seemed like that of a large creature. I ducked behind a log that had fallen and hid to not show myself. I peeked through holes in the log and saw it. This creature, it was black head to toe, had blood dripping down its half-torn face. It had large, bulging, almost human-like eyes. It was standing upright. It looked almost 7 feet. The scariest thing was I could see the creature's ribs, heart, and what looked like lungs still beating and perfectly in sync. I almost screamed at the sight of its nails. They were long and had points on them. The creature looked around, and when I blinked, it wasn't there. Weird, I thought. Maybe I'm just imaging weird things. I tried to laugh it off, but the thought stayed at the back of my head. I had enough and decided to run backwards again. This went on for another 5 minutes when I heard my mom's voice. I ran towards it, and it was near the bones I saw earlier. But the closer I got, the more it seemed stranger. Mom's voice was usually kind and soft as well as comforting. But the voice I was hearing sounded demanding and slow. The closer I got, the more I saw my cabin, and I then started running towards it when the creature I saw earlier rose up on its legs, or what seemed like legs. It was taller when I was face to face with it, its eyes staring into my soul, and I thought I was going to die. With lightning speed, the creature ran towards me, and I blacked out. I woke up. I was alive in my bed, and my sister was here too. I thought it was just a dream, but noticed she was crying. She was crying in a demonic tone. I got scared and pushed back against my bed. My sister turned around, and I saw her eyes ripped out of her sockets as well as blood all around the house. I passed out again. This time I woke up in the forest. I felt immense pain near my arm and realized my left arm was bitten off. I saw it. The creature. He was eating my arm. He noticed I was awake and just stared as I screamed for help. I heard a familiar voice once again. It sounded like my dad. But where was it coming from? The more blood I lost, the closer the voice got, and the more the creature started getting aggravated. I thought I was going to die, but saw both my parents. This made me flash back into reality, and I realized I was going to have to scream in order for me to be alive. I screamed at the top of my lungs. The creature stood on its legs and threw my arm away. He walked towards me and planned on killing me right then and there. I started crying with the last bit of energy I had left, and I saw them. My dad and my mom. They were here. I then noticed Dad was terrified and was backing away when he saw this creature. Mom threw rocks at it, and the creature ran into the forest. My parents picked me up. I was happy to see them. The last thing I saw before I blacked out was my mom behind my dad getting ripped to shreds by that thing. Fifth story. Somewhere in the Canadian wilderness, there's a highway with no exits. Oh, I'm heading through the valley, where the lone road has no end. Grizzly bear and mule deer greet me. Trapper, hunter ain't my friend. Take a sip, poor weary traveler. Don't join in, don't rest your head. Turn yourself back to your trail now. Ravens talk, don't be misled. I can't help but miss my darling. In this lonely place I roam, but the elk and lynx console me. Bighorn sheep will lead me home. I sang my grandfather's old campfire tune as my Subaru cruised along the Tulane Highway. There was no FM radio reception this far out into the mountains, so my choices were to sing or enjoy the silence. This song, in particular, felt appropriate. It had been 2 hours since the road had dipped into this valley, and I couldn't recall seeing an exit since then, even a small dirt road or campground turnoff. My fuel light flicked on. Shit, this was weird. Even if I had taken a wrong turn, I should have seen something by now. I hazarded a glance at my phone. No reception, so no roadside assistance. I also couldn't remember the last time I passed another car. So if I ran out of fuel here, I would be stranded for who knows how long. At an eighth of a tank, I began to panic. 20 minutes later, my engine sputtered and died. I rolled to a stop on the shoulder. Still no reception. My stomach clenched. You're okay, Abby. This will be fine. Just breathe. The scenery here looked exactly like it had for the last 300 kilometers. Evergreen forest grew in every direction, separated from the road on both sides by a 30-meter stretch of grass. The sun peeked over the trees. It would be setting soon. Somewhere, a raven crowed. The emergency kit. That was a good idea. I reached into my back seat and pulled out a large black plastic toolbox. It held a flashlight, water bottle, energy bars, blanket, camp knife, and some other essentials. I opened it up and placed it in the passenger seat. As the sun pulled below the trees, a flash of movement in the tree line caught my eyes. Half curious and half concerned, I pulled out my flashlight and pointed it towards what I'd seen. Nothing. Unsettled, I continued to slowly scan the tree line. I caught something. It looked like a deer's head, poking out of the trees. What the fuck? As my light hit it, it disappeared. Not like the deer had turned around, but like something had yanked the head backwards. I slammed the lock button on my doors and crumpled downwards into my seat. Shit. It was just a deer. Just a deer. Just a deer. My heart slammed relentlessly against my chest. I took a deep breath, then 3 more. I slowly rose back upright and pointed my flashlight towards the trees. I flicked it on. I caught something again. Deer heads, 3 this time. Except they weren't heads, they were skulls.
Fuck no.
I swapped my flashlight into my left hand and retrieved my camp knife with my right. I began to scan both sides of the tree line, praying that I just had some sort of hallucination. As time passed, that started to seem likely. I saw nothing for 20 minutes, then an hour. Deer skulls? I'm going crazy. My heart began to settle. At some point, I drifted off.
Bang 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 bang.
A skull pressed against the passenger window. Another on the driver's side. Another in front of the car. I screamed. A skull slammed into the window beside me. I screamed. The car handles rattled. I screamed. Another slam. A hairline fracture formed in the glass. I choked. There were 5 things pressed up against my car. They stood on 2 legs and looked almost human, but with deer skulls where their heads should have been. They carried spears and bows and wore hide tunics. I caught movement behind them. More were lurking near the trees. One of the things let out a sound. It was almost a voice, but strained and unnatural, like someone trying to speak while inhaling. HHHB. The others joined in. HHHB. Suddenly, in a voice exactly like my grandfather's, perfectly calm. Get out of the car, Abby. I screamed. I'll kill you. Leave me the fuck alone. I'll kill you. I fumbled around below my seat and retrieved the camp knife from where it had fallen. I held it out with shaking hands. The window shattered. A hand reached through and clutched the handle. I thrust forward, burying the knife in the thing's forearm. It pulled the arm back, taking the knife with it. I held on for dear life. The other hand darted forward, grabbing my wrist. It squeezed immediately. My hand went numb. It yanked the knife away, and my limp fingers surrendered it. I backed myself up, trying to slide into the back seat, kicking out desperately with my legs. The car door swung open. Tears streamed down my cheeks. Please iden twanity iden twanity iden twanity. Ignoring my pleas, it grabbed my left ankle and yanked. My head struck the car seat, then the door, then the ground. My vision spun. My hands desperately scrambled for purchase as my body dragged across the dirt and rocks. I bucked, trying to free my foot and get upright. I kicked the thing with my other leg. It didn't even react. I thrashed and shrieked at the top of my lungs. The world faded. I caught glimpses, pockets of consciousness. The deer-headed things all around me. Trees. A worm-ridden corpse hanging from a noose. I awoke in a daze and tried to get my bearings. I was in a 10-foot clearing, in the middle of dense forest. At the center of the clearing was a dining table, with chairs arranged around it. I was seated at the foot. The rest of the places were occupied by the skull-headed things. All of them were quiet, turned in my direction. No animal noises, no sounds of wind whistling through the trees. No ambient sound of any sort pierced the silence in the clearing. There was only me and these creatures from hell. The table was set for each of us. In front of me was a goblet of black liquid and a plate of unsightly meat. As I looked around, one of them spoke in the same unsettling voice as before. Drink, eat, sleep. I shook my head. Have a sip. You must. Something about those words was familiar. Take a sip, poor weary traveler. The song echoed through my head. It reminded me of my grandfather, of nights spent around a campfire in the backyard, singing songs and roasting marshmallows. I would give anything to be back there, anything to be anywhere else. As I continued through the verses in my head, an uncanny realization swept over me. The valley, an endless road, things that mimic human speech, like ravens. They're hunters, trappers, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. It might be a coincidence, but I'd take it over nothing at all. So that means I took a sip of the black liquid. It scorched my tongue, and I stifled a gag. At this, the hunters took massive swigs from their goblets. They broke out into strange chatter. It sounded like a mixture of different animal calls, all blended together into something singular and bizarre. They weren't looking at me anymore. Don't join in. Don't rest your head. As quietly as possible, I lifted out of my chair and slunk towards the tree line. They didn't seem to notice, or if they did, they were too busy to stop me. I broke out into a run. As I hurtled through the trees, I kept my eyes peeled. The song mentioned trappers, too. I could barely see in the darkness, but managed to narrowly avoid a net strung up between two trees, and just barely noticed a tripwire lying across the forest floor. I ran and ran and ran. Nothing seemed to change, and I had no sense of direction. For all I knew, I could have been running in circles. Once I couldn't run anymore, I alternated between walking and jogging. After about an hour, I started hearing voices. Every minute or two, coming from somewhere in the distance. All sorts of perfectly normal voices, some of which were familiar. Abby, where are you? My best friend.
Mom?
Are you out there? Can you talk to us? This is Banff Search and Rescue. A man. Please help me. I'm caught in the net. They're going to kill me. Please help me. a child. Ravens talk. Don't be misled. It barely needed to be said. I continued onwards. After another 20 minutes, I started to hear movement behind me. A long ways off, but getting closer and moving in my direction. I picked up speed and turned 20 degrees to the left. 2 minutes later, the sounds turned as well. They were on my trail. I was out of energy and out of options, in the middle of nowhere. Did I really think I could get away? I felt the little sliver of hope in my chest flicker. But it wasn't dead yet. All I could do was keep running, and I could do that. For half an hour, I managed to stay ahead of my pursuers. I wasn't moving very quickly, but neither were they. Following my trail must have been difficult. As lightheadedness started to set in, I spotted another trap ahead. This one was different. It had caught something. It was a net, hoisted a foot off the ground, and inside was an animal, desperately thrashing around. Poor thing. I'd been running for my life for hours, but something about that trapped animal broke my heart. I know the feeling, little guy. I sighed. I had 2 seconds until I reached the trap, 2 seconds to make a choice. All right, let's do the stupid thing. I was doomed either way. At least this animal could get away if I stopped to help it, even if that allowed my pursuers to catch me faster. I reached the net, then crouched down, sized it up for a moment, and pulled the fastening knot apart. The creature bucked and came free. It was a sheep with 2 large horns. Big-horned sheep will lead me home. The sounds of the hunters drew closer, almost within a stone's throw. The sheep took off, and I followed. A dawn glow started to fill the forest. The sheep bounded through the trees. I desperately pushed through the underbrush, hopping across streams and over stones, trying not to fall behind. My foot slipped on a stepping stone, and I tumbled to the ground. I hastily struggled to my feet, then slipped again. I stumbled forward another step, and my legs gave out from under me. My overspent body was finally shutting down. The sheep was surely long gone by now. I'd lost my chance, just when there was finally a glimmer of hope. I screamed in frustration and despair, and tears welled up in my eyes. My body refused to move. I curled up and waited for death. I felt something wet on my forehead and looked up in shock. The sheep was standing over me, licking the sweat and blood from my face. I smiled in appreciation for a moment. Then, with dread, I turned to look behind me. As I feared, the hunters were barely 20 feet away. They had stopped in a semicircle around us. They brandished their spears and bows, and their skulls screeched and hissed menacingly. Calmly and deliberately, the sheep stepped in front of me, placing himself between me and my pursuers. It was just a small creature, not more than 4 feet tall. But as it stood there defiantly, I couldn't help but feel safe. The hunters looked jittery now, glancing back and forth between one another. What's stopping them? Are they afraid of the sheep? The sheep turned his head back and forth slowly, looking at each of the hunters in turn. He stomped his feet. At the same moment, they hissed and screamed like wounded cats and fled in the direction they came from. I pulled myself to my feet, steadying myself against a tree trunk. The sheep proceeded slowly now, and I limped onwards behind him. Eventually, the trees began to clear, and he stopped. I crouched down next to him. Is this as far as you go? The raspy voice that escaped my lips barely sounded like my own. He bucked his head up and down slightly. Not sure whether it was appropriate, I pulled him into a hug. I started to cry again. Thank you, I whispered. He leaned his head into my neck for a moment, then we pulled apart, and he plodded off back into the trees. The more I think about that night, the more I conclude that I found the favor of something ancient and powerful that day. something that could have easily freed itself from that trap if it wished to. I continued to the edge of the forest, and I found myself back on the highway. I heard the sound of a vehicle and turned around. A pickup truck was coming down the road in my direction. I waved my arms over my head, and it began to slow down, then pulled to the shoulder alongside me. "Howdy!" shouted the burly, bearded man who stepped out. "You drive an Impreza?" I nodded, too tired to speak or think. "Happened to cross your car a bit down the way. I got an extra jerrycan if you just need gas." I nodded again. "You want to ride back there? I get if that ain't comfortable, so whatever you think." I nodded a third time. As we pulled away, I found myself drifting off. As my consciousness slipped away, the driver began to sing quietly. "Oh, I'm heading through the valley, where the lone road has no end." So there you have it. I made it back to my car. The highway where my car was parked looked nothing like the endless highway I was stranded on. Slept in the back for a while, then continued on my way. If there's a takeaway here, it's this. Pass on the old campfire songs you hear. They could save lives. 6th story. Unidentifiable 10-foot-tall creature spotted in Lebanon, Maine. My sister and I were driving to a haunted walk in Lebanon, Maine called Destination Haunt, and while in the town trying to find the place, we drove onto this really old dirt road called Lord Road from the east. At the time we turned onto the road, it was day and the sun was out. As soon as we started driving down, the sky turned near black like night, as if the sun was setting and a fog engulfed the road. We quickly started joking about how this is like one of those wrong turn roads in those horror movies where a group of kids get lost in the woods and never leave. It added to the effect when we drove over an old wooden bridge suspended over a river. My sister acknowledged the narrowness of the road and asked how 2 cars could fit traveling in opposite directions. I joked, "Well, no one ever leaves this place. In Maine, all you see are fields of trees for hundreds of miles at a time." But the trees on this road looked unusually different. They were all collectively old and had the colors sucked out of them. Their branches and bases curved in usually zigzag patterns, unlike conventional trees that grow in a pattern to get the most sunlight. I drove a few miles until I had enough of the massive puddles and decided to call the place we were trying to find. They told me that their location was miles away on the west side of this road and to turn back because the east side was flooded and we should enter the west end entrance located on the other side of town instead. We turned around and saw a moose walking across the road, very normal in Maine. But right behind it was a 10-foot-tall black as can be two-legged and unnaturally slim creature running unnaturally fast across the road. My sister screamed. It looked like Slender Man. Only it had huge black jagged horns and had no apparent bodily features or shape to it. It looked like a 2D cut out of an unnatural human. When we drove by where he ran, we looked into the woods and saw it standing on 2 legs next to the moose. It leaned over in a hunchback manner and started walking around on all limbs, and there were others just like it emerging from the mist. We drove the hell out of there hoping my engine wouldn't seize from the huge-ass puddles. But on our way back, we saw 2 abandoned buildings with old cars from the 50s and 60s that rotted into the earth. Those houses were not there before when we originally drove down. The creepiest part was when we got back to the main road because the sun was almost set and the sky almost pitch black. When we pulled out of the road, the sun reappeared. The sky readjusted to day as if nothing ever happened. Later that night, I looked at Google Maps and the road was completely different on there, filled with things that wasn't there when we driving, and all the houses looked new. After telling a few people about it, someone told me that Lebanon, Maine is known to have a lot of strange paranormal stuff happen, and that there is even a self-proclaimed witch fortune teller who lives there. Has anyone here experienced something like this? 7th story. The Wendigo. I am a fan of horror games. I don't play them, but I love watching my favorite YouTubers play them. In fact, My favorite YouTuber who used to play horror games is H2O Delirious. One of my favorite game that he played is Until Dawn. I love it because it deals with a cultural monster, the Wendigo. The Wendigo is a monster who craves for human flesh. Wendigos were once human, but because they started to eat human flesh, they turned into Wendigos. Wendigos are able to imitate other people's voices to trick their prey. Wendigos are able to hear heartbeats from miles away. They are also really fast. I am starting to go off topic. Here is my story. I had my own experience with the Wendigo. I live in a small town near the forest. I won't reveal where the place is because I am still afraid that it is still there. A friend and I, a female girl that is a year younger than me, decided to walk in the forest by ourselves. There aren't any dangers in the forest since we were still close to town. We stumbled upon a 2-story, worn-down cabin while walking near the outskirts of town. Most of the second story was non-existent. It seemed strange that it was still up and no one torn it down. Before I was born, the people of this town torn down all buildings in the forest for reasons unknown. I tried asking my parents, but their response is that it was very difficult to aid people who lived in the forest. Anyway, my friend and I got very curious and decided to check it out. We were quiet upon entering the cabin, which now that I am looking back at it, I am very thankful that we were quiet. At the time we were quiet in case there was a homeless man sleeping or a dangerous person in there. It was still daytime when we were exploring, so we had plenty of light in the cabin, but there was one part of the cabin that was covered up. There was a black tarp that covered a doorway to some room. We never went near the doorway. We were both scared that we would get jumped by someone. My friend and I both agreed to stay clear of that area. Throughout the exploring, we both noticed that there was a faint, disgusting smell. The smell lingered only on the first floor. I know the reason is because since the second floor is open, the wind would blown off the smell away. Plus, there must have been dead animals beneath the floorboards or something. It was only when we got near the closed-off room did everything went downhill. Both my friend and I started to get a bit louder since we did not hear anybody in the building. When we got near the hallway of the room, the smell got drastically stronger. Then we both noticed that the tarp had moved ajar. The room was still too dark, but I could have sworn that there were a pile of bones. I noticed that my friend gotten slightly scared because neither one of us had gone 8 feet near the room. My first thought was that someone was living here, and that we should get out quietly in case the person was dangerous. I signaled my friend to be quiet and to follow me towards the back exit. As we were about to leave, we heard a familiar voice. I looked at my friend and I could see in her face confusion. Then it spoke again. It was calling for help. We both continued to stand near our exit, frozen in shock. Who could it be? Why would anybody need help in this place? We explored this cabin, and we know the area. You could hardly get hurt around here. I got rid of my shock and slowly I went near the shouts. My friend, upon realizing that I was making my way towards the shouts, pulled me back. She told me that it might be a trap and that I should not go any nearer to the person. She also said that the voice seems off. She does not understand why, but she knows that there is something off about the screams. No later, when she said that, we heard some other people shout if the mysterious screaming person was okay. Quick movements were heard somewhere in the cabin. Fear struck us both, and we slowly walked backwards to the door. The movements that we heard seemed inhuman. The sound we heard is like the sound of the wind of a jump rope makes when going really fast. Not only that, but after the event, when my friend got the courage to speak about this event, she said that she saw a blur move across the room near where, maybe, the other people were at. By the time we were at the door, the other people came. They were 2 unfortunate men. They both looked around before seeing us. "Are you 2 okay?" one of them asked. We gave no response. We were still afraid what was in the house. One step forward towards us was enough. "Are you dash?" She got cut off. The thing that was lurking in the shadows came out. It attacked the man. The thing was bony and the skin was pale and rotten. It looked human, but it clearly wasn't. The thing ripped the head of the poor man. We did not see the rest of it, for we booked out of the cabin and ran as fast as we could. All we heard a scream, but as soon as we heard it, it was cut off. Then there was another one. But this one wasn't human. We both did not stop until we reached the town. We never spoke to this event to anybody. Not even when people have asked us if we were okay, since we both looked pale and out of breath. Be careful out there in the woods. You never know what might happen. May the Lord save you if you come across one of them. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm. Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail. The realm where the shadows whisper ancient secrets and nightmares come to life. I am your guide through the darkness, and on this channel, we delve into the spine-chilling world of Wendigo horror stories that will send shivers down your spine. First story. Stay away from the not deer. I don't know if anyone else in the country has seen something like it, but the area I live has a bunch of not deer. It's not something anyone around here talks about a lot, but when someone calls you in the middle of the night in hysterics or shows up on your doorstep with a wild look in their eye, you know what they saw. And they're never quite the same after they've seen it. It's hard to explain what exactly the not deer is. The name isn't very good at telling you much. You just know it when you see it. It will look like a deer, but only if you don't look closely. If you give it more than a cursory glance, then you start to see how it's not a deer at all. I've collected a few accounts my friends have had about this thing. One of my drinking buddies, who we'll call Tyler, spilled his story over some beers at our favorite little dive. Me and him were sitting with a couple of other friends in the bar. We were all a bunch of 40-something guys who had grown up in rural Appalachia. Tyler looked around the bar to see if anyone close to us was gonna hear what he said next. He told me that he saw it when he was young, in about his early 20s. Tyler was smart and had gotten into a university in a big city. He was driving back to his hometown out in the country for winter break so he could spend Christmas with his folks. He was driving a little slow down a 2-lane country road on account of the ice and snow that the area had been getting. He was keeping an eye out for animals since he was driving through the middle of the woods, so he was well prepared for if something like a deer leaped out of the woods a ways in front of his car. What not enough people understand is that hitting a deer out in the middle of nowhere can be a death sentence. They will wreck your car, and if it's a buck, then you have the extra danger of the antlers going through the windshield and into a place they're not supposed to be. So it's understandable that Tyler slammed his brakes when he saw the deer. He came to a stop about 20 feet in front of it. Tyler sat there waiting for the deer to move out of the way. He told me that at first it looked like any other normal deer, but he slowly started to realize that something was off about it. Tyler told me that the deer didn't get out of the way immediately. He said that it was wobbling on its legs like a newborn. It took a shaky step forward, then another, and then it began to walk more confidently until it was out of the way of the truck. As the deer was walking, Tyler realized that what was off about the deer was its legs. I asked him what it was about them that was off, but he just shook his head. "I don't know, man," he said. "There were either too many bends in them or not enough. It was just wrong. Wasn't made right." Tyler said that as soon as he noticed this, he got more afraid. He said it felt like his heart had sunk into his stomach. After the deer had gotten out of the car's way, it stopped in its tracks. Then its head turned around to face Tyler. "It looked too smart," Tyler said. "It wasn't looking at me, it was looking into me." Tyler put the pedal to the metal, not caring about the ice and snow on the road. He said he kept up that speed for 5 minutes. His heart was beating hard against his chest, and he had to take deep breaths to get himself to calm down. After Tyler finished his story, we were all silent. Then one of my other friends, who we'll call Jamie, spoke up. "I've never seen it," Jamie said in a voice that made me think he was lying. "But my dad has." Jamie said that it happened when he was a teen. His dad was going out to the outhouse in the middle of the night. Jamie's dad brought a flashlight with him, so he can see where he was going. He got from the house to the outhouse just fine, but when he was walking from the outhouse back to the house, he shined the flashlight into the nearby tree line. Standing just at the edge of the tree line was a deer. The deer's eyes reflected the light of the flashlight back at Jamie's dad, making it appear as though the deer's eyes were glowing. It's something that happens with all deer and all lights, but it can still be unnerving. The deer ran off after a few seconds. Jamie's dad started walking back towards the house when he heard a rustling in the trees. He shone the flashlight at the tree line again. According to Jamie's dad, there were deer standing about 5 feet apart from each other up and down the tree line. They were standing still, just looking at him. Jamie's dad got spooked and booked it back to the house. The next morning, Jamie and his dad had to drive into town for supplies. His dad told Jamie all about what happened during the drive. But Jamie said as he told the story, his dad seemed to get more unnerved, more scared. When he got to the part with all the deer standing in line, he paused. "You know, something about those deer wasn't right. Besides the obvious." Jamie's dad was silent for a bit before he said, "It was the eyes. They didn't glow. And their faces, they were wrong. Didn't look like a deer's." "What do you mean?" Jamie had asked his dad. "It was like someone had to make a deer's face from memory, and then you stuck it on an actual deer's body." Jamie's dad was silent for a while after that. It was only when they pulled into the store in town that Jamie's dad spoke up again. "You know, Jamie, I'm starting to think what I saw weren't deer at all." Once again, our group of friends was silent. We drank our beers for a while. Then Carl spoke up. "I got a story." Carl was a laid-back guy, never really partied, never complained about his job, and was never really one to strike up the conversation. He was usually the proverbial third wheel in a group. Carl said this happened maybe 3 years ago. He ran a hardware store in town that had fallen on rough times. He decided to travel into the city to go to a business seminar being given by one of those so-called gurus to try and get his store out of the red. He was driving on a country road towards the city when the deer ran out of the woods and in front of the car. Kyle slammed the brakes and was able to stop before he hit the deer. The deer swiveled its head around to face Kyle. Kyle said, "It was like Tyler said. It wasn't looking at me. It was looking into me." Kyle just sat there looking at the thing, waiting for it to get a whiff of the smell of the truck or him and run off. But instead, it walked up to the car. It raised its front legs and planted its hooves on the hood of Kyle's truck. The deer just stayed there, towering over Kyle. It looked down at him, staring at him straight into his eyes. Its breathing was real heavy and raspy, Kyle said. Sounded phlegmy too, like it was trying to couch something up. It was terrible. My heart went into my throat. I just felt like something was going to happen if I just stayed there. So I did what I had to. Kyle said he pressed down on the accelerator. The deer lost its balance and went under the truck. The truck bucked and rocked as it rolled over the deer's body. Once it was up and over, Kyle slammed the accelerator and tried to drive away as quickly as he could. As he was driving away, Kyle looked into his rear view. He could see the deer shaking, but it managed to stand back up on its hind legs. If you're ever driving through the eastern part of the country on an isolated road, keep an eye out for these things. They're a part of the forest here, and they won't mess with you if you don't mess with them. Drive safe. Second story. There's something wrong with the deer in my yard. It's just standing in my backyard right now. See, I have a window that looks right out into it, and the weird thing isn't the deer itself. I mean, this deer is weird, but the fact that there is deer in town here isn't weird at all. I live in a small town in Montana, and recently the population of deer has basically exploded locally. They're everywhere. You can't go for a walk anymore without spotting up to 20 of the damn things, and the town is barely a mile from end to end. This thing, though, I don't know if anyone else has seen it but me, and that's terrifying. I was just browsing the internet, listening to true crime shit on YouTube while I wonder traded Pokemon, because what else does a person stuck in Podunk do but try to forget there. My cat was curled up at the foot of my bed sleeping, and I was ready for a night of bland nothingness that I was used to. It's quiet here. No traffic past 8 p.m. let alone when it's dark. So when I heard this scream, it really caught my attention. It was distorted somehow, like someone screaming through a filter or underwater, but it wasn't quiet for it. It was loud as fuck, and my cat woke up instantly and jumped off the bed with all his fur on end. I don't know where he went, to hide probably. He tore out of my room like a bat out of hell, and I just sat there in silence, half thinking that I'd somehow imagined it, despite my cat's reaction being quite contrary. Okay, let's be rational about this. Something, just screamed. Really loud. Just look out the window, right? I can't explain why, but I was terrified to look out there. The mere thought made me feel sick to my stomach. My bed is situated so that it's right in front of the window, and I felt like something was watching me, waiting for some kind of reaction to what I'd heard. But that's stupid, right? Someone could have been hurt after all. I mean, I lived in a small town. Nothing too terrible happens in this shit town. So I figured that I was just overreacting. I'm overthinking the sound. Maybe someone has fallen off their roof in the middle of the night or something. So I looked. All that was in my yard was a deer, standing off near the back fence and hunched over in a way that immediately made me uneasy, like it was hunched or crouched. Now it was dark out, so I couldn't see that well. There's a street light, but it doesn't light up my backyard well because the fence follows the line of an alleyway. So I didn't realize right away what was off about this thing. It was standing really still, and I was wondering if it also heard the sound too when it shifted very slowly forward, like it was creeping onto the edge of the house. And that's when I realized what was absolutely fucked about this thing. It wasn't on all fours. It was hunched over, so I couldn't spot it right away when it wasn't moving, but the thing was bipedal. Somehow it was walking just on its two hind legs. I can't explain it, but there was so much wrongness about the way it walked. A jerking, hilting step that drew it closer to the window. It was like it could somehow sense that I was watching it. No, not sense, it could see. Its face was turned toward me, and though it was too dark for me to see it well, I swear to God it was keeping eye contact with me. I noped out then, pulled the curtains shut, and have frantically moved my bed to the other side of the room. The doors are locked. I've double-checked, triple-checked. The windows are all shut. But God, I can't shake the feeling that this thing can somehow see me still. I've barricaded myself in my bathroom because there's no window in here. I want to get the cat, but I'm scared to step out of the room. Should I call someone? Who do I call? Freaking animal control. That thing wasn't right. I don't have a gun. I never hunted like my parents, and I'm regretting it like hell right now. I keep hearing noises around the edge of the house. Not the screams, thank God, but just this tapping, like it's trying to figure out a way to get inside. I'm terrified, but what the hell do I do? Third story. There's something wrong with the deer in my area, and I don't think it's just deer anymore. I'm from a small town in a very rural state which I will not name for privacy purposes. I studied sociology in my state university and graduated with honors. I couldn't afford any further education because I had a family to take care of, so I resorted to other jobs. It wasn't so bad. I worked every day as a handyman in my hometown. It was so small and obscure that we weren't even on the map. Population, 200 people. That said, one thing I did with my brothers was that we went hunting once the season opened up. My brothers and I still lived in town, but we would go up to the mountain and camp with our father before he passed away. We kept that tradition up since then. I was the youngest one. My brother Jack was the middle child, and Jason was the oldest one. We would go camping in the woods for a week and just drink beer, shoot around a bit, and relax. My kids would go to my parents', and my wife would take that week to relax away from the stress of kids and me. It was a nice setup that we all looked forward to. Sometimes I would bring back enough deer meat to last my entire family a month. We would also share with our closest friends and neighbors. It was the neighborly thing to do. Besides, there were always more deer in the woods. Things took a turn 2 years ago when I was diagnosed with alpha-gal syndrome, a disease that can be caused by tick bites, which makes you allergic to a sugar molecule found in most mammals. It causes me to break out into rashes, hives, itching, vomiting, and everything in between. I felt like it was some sort of cosmic joke, being forced to become a vegetarian by my own body. That said, I still went along with my brothers to join them in hunting. Although I couldn't eat the meat, I could still drink and lay back. Hey, Jake, why don't you just eat some meat? Stop being a wimp and overcome it. Jason slapped the cap off of my head while walking over to get another beer. Dumbass, you can't overcome an allergy. I'll some eat the day you learn to eat a salad. I jested back, causing Jack to roar with laughter. The first day went by smoothly. We just sat around drinking and ribbing on each other. By the third day, we began to get a bit more serious with our tracking skills. We noticed several deer tracks a bit away from our camp, and we spent a couple of hours following it until we saw it. A reddish-brown doe stood gracefully at around 3 feet tall. She was feeding on some grass, just munching away, completely unaware of how close to being another poor victim of the cruelty of the life cycle. I looked over at Jack, who had his rifle aimed at it, but before he could take a shot, Jason hollered loudly and lightly shoved Jack, causing the gun to go off. The deer snapped its head at us before quickly squirreling away back into the woods. Jason, the fuck did you do that for? Jack shoved Jason away from him, who was laughing hysterically. Yeah, man, we spent all day tracking this one down. I said, pretty irritated. Oh, relax, you guys. There was barely any meat in that doe anyways. You guys are so serious. Lighten up. Everything is a joke with you. Jack muttered while adjusting his rifle. What's that supposed to mean? Jason asked, feigning curiosity. All right, enough you two. We spent all day at this. Why don't we go back to camp and settle in for the day? I'm pretty hungry, and it's getting pretty cold. I intercepted, not wanting to cause yet another needless argument.
Fine.
Let's go. Jack agreed, and we began to walk back to our camp. I awoke the next morning to a pretty loud commotion. Jack was yelling at Jason. I rolled my eyes and opened my tent to see Jack's face was covered in slight blood, while Jason was laughing hysterically. What the fuck happened to your face? I asked, pretty concerned. This fucking asshole did dash. Jason cut Jack off by opened his tent wide open, revealing the body of a doe right next to Jack's sleeping bag. As I looked closer, I thought I could see it still twitch. I put the doe right next to Jack when he was sleeping. Oh, you should have looked at his face. The way he started screaming. Jason said in between fits of laughter. This is the last time I go camping with you. Jack angrily yelled while he stormed off with a water bottle to clean his face. I looked over at Jason and nodded my head in disappointment. Not cool, dude. What? It was just a joke? Whatever. We should probably go and start the field dressing of the dough. Already done that, he boasted while taking a sip of another canned beer. Really? I guess we should load it up on the truck and take it back to Ma's house then, I said, trying to hold in a yawn. Jack came back looking cleaner than before, and they began to haul off the deer into the direction of the truck. I stayed behind to start taking down the tents and gathering our supplies. I trailed behind my brothers, and as they loaded the body into the back of the truck, I put our supplies into my car. We began to drive back to our mother's house. Eventually, we reached our destination, and right as we pulled up, my kids came running out of the house. Tyler was the first one to reach me, his little arms reaching up for me to hold him. Hey buddy, how's it going? Where's Grandma? I asked while Tina jogged after him. Dad, Mom said I could sign up for drama camp at the end of this month. She stated firmly. All right, we'll look at it over together later. Where's Grandma? I asked. I'm right here. My mother came out, standing right next to my wife as they walked on over. Oh dear, you guys look grimy. Bring the deer to the barn, and you boys can start skinning and butchering after you shower, she stated firmly while motioning us to go into the house. I quickly kissed my wife before running into the house and quickly jumping into a shower. By the time I finished, I saw that my family was sitting around the kitchen with my brothers nowhere to be seen. Where's Jack and Jason? I asked while grabbing a cup of coffee. Your brothers went to the barn to start processing the deer. They said hopefully they can finish by tonight. We can start slow cooking some venison barbecue and have it ready by morning, my wife said while taking a bite of some crackers. I leaned forward and gave her a hug, leaning my chin over her head. Tina just giggled as she continued to eat her breakfast. How was camping? Ma asked while taking a bite out of some bacon. It was okay. Same old stuff. I lied with a smile, hoping to avoid any arousal. She always hated conflicts. She raised her eyebrow, but continued to eat while looking down at her phone. The rest of the day went by smoothly, and my brothers worked hard to prep the deer meat, while the rest of us made random dishes here and there for tomorrow. By the time we finished cleaning and cooking, it was time to go to bed. I put my kids to bed and helped my mother clean up before going to bed with my wife. The next day, I woke up to the smell of various sizzling meats and spices wafting through the bedroom door. I got up and quickly got ready to start my day and headed downstairs. Morning, sweetie, my wife said, all cheery as she poured a cup of coffee for me. Your entire family went over to see some neighbors that needed help or something. They said they'll be back soon. Is that so? I raised my eyebrow while giving her a peck on the lips. Sadly, we have to set up the entire table because a ton of people are coming over for dinner. She sighed while leaning her head onto my shoulder. I laughed it off and started helping her load all the chairs and plates for our guests. Eventually, hours went by and my family started arriving along with several people. I looked over at Jack and saw that he was rubbing his right eye before walking over to me. Hey, you got some eye drops? I think I got pink eye, he said before being interrupted by an aunt who motioned me to go greet her. Yeah, I think there's some in my bathroom. Go ahead and check. I dismissed him as I went off to make small talk to random people. Eventually, it was time for dinner, and we all sat around as Jason started bragging about how he single-handedly caught the deer and hustled it to the truck as me and Jack slept through it all. I couldn't eye-roll anymore at his dumb story because I could feel a migraine start to form. He didn't even touch his plate, spending all of his time talking. Soon they started to dig into the venison barbecue, which looked delicious, dripping in various juices and slathered in barbecue sauce. I begrudgingly ate my potato salad and rice as everyone around me marveled about the taste of venison. The rest of the night went by smoothly, and we continued to talk and drink until it was time for my kids to go to bed. The last of the guests went home, and we cleaned up and called it a day. It was about 3 in the morning when I felt some hands on my shoulders shake me awake. "Daddy, I don't feel good." I heard the quiet whisper of Tina as she moaned in slight pain. "What's wrong, sweetie?" I said, my eyes adjusting to the dark. "It hurts." She moaned even more as she leaned her head on my chest. I reached over and turned on the light before looking down at her. Her once beautiful blue eyes were now completely bloodshot, and she had a rash all over her neck. It looked like trickles of blood were pouring slightly out of her eyes. Jesus Christ! I pushed my hand on her little forehead, and her head wasn't just slightly warm. It felt like she was on fire. She suddenly collapsed and went limp on my arms, but I could still feel her breathing. I leaned my right arm onto my wife's shoulder and shook her. "Kristen, wake up. Kristen." She groggily awoke and looked over at us. "What's wrong?" she asked before snapping wide awake. "Oh my God, Tina. What happened to you? Baby, are you okay?" "Kristen, I gotta take her to the hospital. We gotta go now," I said rapidly while scooping up my daughter as we rushed out of the bedroom. We hurried down the stairs and into the car before driving straight onto the road. My wife pulled out her phone and pressed it against her ear. "Linda, Jack and I are on our way to the hospital right now. There's something wrong with Tina, but Tyler is in his bed. I'll let you know when we get there." I floored the gas and drove straight through the darkness of the night, counting down the minutes until we reached the hospital. We eventually spotted the lights of the town and kept driving through until we saw the hospital building up ahead. I looked over my shoulder to see my daughter holding my wife tightly. Although the engine of the car was pretty loud, I could hear the muffled giggles of Tina. I looked over at my wife, who was as equally confused as I was, but before we could even say anything, I quickly slammed on the brake before I could hit the parked ambulance in front of us. I quickly got out of my car and opened the door to my wife's side and grabbed my daughter from my wife's hands. We ran into the entrance of the hospital, running up to the only receptionist that was standing looking tired. "Please help my daughter. She passed out earlier, and she has these weird rashes on her face," my wife cried out. The receptionist perked up and looked at us both before grabbing a phone and dialing it. "We have an OB code." A nurse came out of nowhere with a gurney and laid my daughter on it. Tina's entire skin was all red, and the outline of her veins were turning all black. She looked even worse than before. My beautiful little girl looked so sick that my heart was breaking. They only let my wife through the doors with Tina. The receptionist started asking me all these questions to which I had no answers for. "Sir, what happened to your daughter? What was she doing when she passed out?" "I don't know. All I know was that she woke us up and passed out, and when I turned on the light her skin looked like hell. The black veins is something new," I answered honestly. "All right. The staff is doing everything they can to assess the situation. For now, please take a seat, and we'll notify you in a couple of minutes." Before I could argue back, my phone went off. I looked down to see that it was my son Tyler who was FaceTiming me. He must have noticed that we were gone. I accepted it, but the screen was all black. I could barely see the faint outline of his face. "Hey buddy, Mom and I were J-dash. Shoo, something's wrong with Grandma."
I'm scared.
He whispered quietly. My heart quickly dropped to my stomach. "Is she sick? What's wrong with Grandma?" I asked. "Listen." He got quiet and must have held out his phone, but I couldn't see anything. It looked like he was in the kitchen bathroom downstairs. I was about to say something, but the camera focused, and I could see the back of my mother's head as she sat facing away from our line of vision. She was just laughing hysterically as she cut away at something. Tyler moved the camera downward at a better angle to see what she was cutting. I took a closer look to see that she was slicing away at one of the dogs on the table. I felt the contents of my stomach jump at my throat.
Ok, baby.
Close the door and I'll be right there. Lock it, I whispered. I ran out back into my car and quickly called Holden, the town sheriff and a close friend. He answered pretty quickly, his voice sounding all tired and annoyed. Jake? Listen, Br-. I cut him off before he could say anything else. Something's wrong with my mom. Holden, something ain't right at my house. I went to the hospital with Tina and Kristen, and I need you send some cops over at my house. I'm real scared, man. I blurted out. Jake, all my guys have already been sent out. It's like the town's gone crazy tonight. I'm at the station right now, but I'll be there as soon as I can. I'll meet you there. His voice was as equally as shakily as mine was as he hung up. I must have drove 100 miles per hour because it was mere minutes before I arrived at my house. I slammed the car door and ran to the direction of my house. I wanted to go in, but I saw Jason sitting out in the front porch. Jason? What the fuck is going on? I yelled angrily that he wasn't inside looking after Tyler or my mother. He looked up at me and started laughing hysterically before crying hysterically. I've never seen Jason cry before. I think I caused this. He blubbered out. What do you mean? I asked, now fully curious. That morning I got that deer. I went for a walk in the morning, and I saw that doe acting weird. She was making this odd noise and slamming her head onto a tree. At first, I thought it was the funniest thing I ever seen. It was like the deer was laughing as she hit her head with a tree. I know they say to avoid deer that act weird, but y'all were already mad at me for ruining that shot the day before. Y'all were always mad at me. So I aimed my rifle and put her down. I thought the meat would have been cleaned out by the heat when we cooked it. When's the last time we ever got sick? I just wanted y'all to be happy with me. He cried out before shaking uncontrollably as he put his hands up to his face. I felt an anger in me like never before. That bastard put his ego before our health, and now Tina was in the hospital, and God knows what was going on with my mother. I walked up to him ready to pound at his face, but stopped the closer I got to him. He was all covered in blood. Jason, is that your blood? I asked quietly. No. He shook his head before continuing. Jack was acting all weird. I found him beheading Mama, and he started coming at me with a butcher knife. I had to stop him. I looked at him horrified before looking back at the front door. I took a few steps before walking into the house. The entire living room looked like a tornado went through it. There was Jack's body laying through what was once a glass coffee table. The entire right side of his face was covered in boils and that same rash Tina had. I looked away before running to the kitchen bathroom. Buddy, I said softly, trying not to scare him as I gently knocked on the door. The door opened with a slight squeak, and I felt Tyler's body wrap around me. Daddy, I was so scared. I heard a bunch of yelling coming from everyone. He cried out, his body shaking in my arms as he talked. I know, bud. Just close your eyes, and I'll carry you out. We're going back to the hospital to get Mommy and Tina. He merely nodded before I scooped him up. We walked over to the front of the house and started walking in the direction of the car when I started seeing the police lights of Holden's car. He pulled up near me and motioned me to enter the car. You guys okay? He quickly asked. Yeah, man, we're fine, but I wanted to explain, but he cut me off before I could say anything else. Listen, something is wrong. The military is pulling up and setting blockades around town. I had to call on the CDC earlier. Some weird outbreak about some prion disease among the local deer. It drove some people mad and made them do some scary things. I'll take you guys up to my cabin, but I gotta go see what they're doing in the hospital." He spoke as fast as he could. "Kristen and Tina are there. Are they okay? Do you know anything?" I quietly asked, trying not to scare Tyler. "I called up Dr. Reynolds, and he said Tina showed the symptoms, but it's too early to tell with Kristen. She chose to stay with Tina while I took you two to the cabin. As soon as they're cleared, I can drive them back. The phones aren't working right because there was an accident at our only cell tower, but you can still text. I think we have Wi-Fi for now." I wanted to ask more questions, but I merely buckled in and started texting Kristen. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, we're fine. Tina's asleep right now." "You good?" "Yeah." "Have you talked to Holden?" "Yeah. He said we'll meet at his cabin." "Is he on his way now?" "No. He's still dropping us off. Text me when you see him." "All right. See you in a bit." And with that, I felt slightly relieved. I was going to wait in person to tell her about my mother, Jack, and Jason. Eventually, we reached his cabin, and I took Tyler up to a spare bedroom as Holden drove off. I'm growing restless at not being able to do anything, but I have Tyler to look after right now. Do you think we'll be all right? Fourth story. The Knot Deer of Pulaski County. I suppose, due to the nature of this page, a lot of you have heard of a knot deer. For those of you who haven't, I pray you never find out firsthand. Oh, where are my manners? My name is Madison. I'm almost 25 years old, and I've lived in a tiny village called Ullin, pronounced Uhlin, for about 2 years now. Shortly after moving here, I encountered one of these creatures said to only roam the Appalachian states. I know, it was after dark, and you're going to ask if I'd been drinking or anything, or you're going to say that my eyes were playing tricks on me with a deer and some shadows. First of all, I was stone cold sober that night, as I don't drink, save for once every other blue moon. Secondly, this thing was standing directly under a streetlight. I can't be losing my mind, right? Right? Pardon me, I'm getting ahead of myself. Allow me to start from the top. It was a stagnant, humid August evening in tiny Podunk Ullin, not Ullin. The sun had recently set, and the stars had just started to wink to life in the gradient canvas of navy blue, purple, and black overhead. So I'd probably set it at about 9 to 9:15 in the evening. Things were fairly quiet, as they usually are in this little town. A dog barking in the distance, and the occasional whisper of a car going down the main road about a block and a half from my house. I live with my wonderful fiancé, we'll call him Kevin, as I'm not sure he'd want his identity known, and his name isn't really relevant to the occurrence. Directly across the street from a lovely, small baseball park. I used to love going for evening walks through this little park, until that night. I finished letting our 2 dogs outside for a run and potty before their bedtime and fed our deaf cat, Lance. Then I grabbed up my double-decker cheeseburger-shaped coffee mug/pipe, baggie of weed. Yes, I do smoke pot regularly, but don't jump to any conclusions yet, and Lucky Bic lighter, which is red with a picture of Morty Smith from Rick and Morty printed on it. And after telling my fur kids that I loved them and would return shortly, stepped out into the soupy night air. It was so warm I half considered staying inside where it was more comfortable. But I'd had a long day at work at the local dollar store, and definitely needed to get some mano-y-mano with the cool grass and my favorite smoking piece. Maybe that'd be mano-y-mano-y-mano? I dunno. Anyway, where was I? Oh yes. I was crossing the street to hop over the ditch and onto the side of the park, when I heard the strangest, most terrifying sound, something straight out of a nightmare. The best way I could describe it would be like the cry of some kind of animal giving birth, but the sound was so wet and gargled, as though the laboring beast's throat were slit. I was mid-jump when this horrendous, nightmare-fueling wail, and it scared me so badly that I tried to stop in midair, succeeded, only to fall into the ditch, probably 3 or 4 feet deep, not including the extra 8 to 10 inches of height I'd had over said ditch. Pain exploded up my leg, blooming from my ankle in a sensation I know all too well as a sprain, me being a klutz and all. I let out a cry of my own, grabbing my already swelling ankle and rushing to tighten my high-top shoe with a stick pushed down on either side as a makeshift splint until I could hobble back across the street. After making the impromptu support for my injured foot, I finally looked around for the source of what had given me such a fright. That's when I saw it, standing directly under a street light alongside a paved road leading through the park, ears perked and gaze trained directly on me. The creature was bigger than any deer I'd ever seen, even dwarfing me in its horrible stature. I'm no small woman by any means, standing at 6 foot tall and about 270 to 300 pounds. But this, I don't know, animal? It had to be all of my height, just at the shoulder, and the rack atop his head was a sight to behold in and of itself, or probably would have been, had it not been so badly battered, and in some parts completely snapped off at the end. At one point, I would have wagered that the beast was at least 24 to 26 points. He would have smashed the record for Trophy Buck, which is currently 22 points, for those who are curious. The moment I could tear my gaze away from the monstrous, darkly stained antlers crowning the beast is the moment I really noticed that something was terribly wrong with the creature. Its fur was filthy and matted with what I can only hope wasn't the same deep crimson stuff staining its antlers, but due to how some patches of its body gleamed as though encrusted with liquefied rubies under the overhead light, my hopes are probably in vain. Yes, several chunks of its skin were completely gone, exposed flesh wriggling with plump, white little bodies that would occasionally fall away onto the paved road below. This creature was beyond sickly. He looked all but zombified. His skin barely hung on his bones, and his legs were just bent all wrong. This could have been a malformed deer that had just been abandoned young and gotten deathly ill, but I can't express enough to you all the sheer size of this thing. The bottom of its chin would easily come over the top of a brand new, big pickup truck like a dually or something. It couldn't be any smaller than a fully grown moose, I swear to you. Despite its horribly emaciated, even rotted state, it was massive, and it was beyond imposing. But the most horrifying part of all about this creature is the eyes or eye. One had obviously been gouged out at some point, replaced by a puckered, inflamed mass of blood, pus, and more maggots, but the other one held enough malice, pure, unmistakable disgust and outrage at my very existence, for the both of them. I was completely frozen for what felt like just a moment, terrified beyond screaming at the sight of an almost skinless deer skull snarling with rage at me atop such a grotesquely huge body. The lack of visible muscle framing the creature gave me no illusions to the level of its strength. Somehow I just know that if the thing wants me dead, I'll be dead. But finally the creature gave me what I can only call a nod of its disgusting, antlered head, then turned away and sauntered off towards the neighboring strip of woods. I swear it felt like I was only there for about a minute or two, but when I could finally move, blink, breathe, the eastern skies were starting to lighten. I had several missed calls and voicemails from a worried future fiancé, and numerous texts as well, all wondering where I was and why I hadn't come to bed. I rushed back home across the street and wrapped up my ankle to stave off the swelling, topped off with the occasional ice pack, but I couldn't sleep for days after what I'd seen, felt, and experienced. I was getting paranoid, jumpy, and my partner, godsend that he is, started to worry. I finally tried to tell him about what happened and what I'd experienced, but predictably he thought I'd just been tripping balls. However, notice that I hadn't even reached the park before this happened. I never got to light up. I was not under any influence when I'd seen the beast, not even when I'd lost almost 8 hours of time. Why am I telling you all this now, after almost 2 years of silence? Well, the past 3 nights, I've been hearing wet, guttural snorts and these terrible, snapping scrape sounds out by the tree in the front yard. And the heavy hoof sounds that precede and succeed those noises are more befitting those of a horse, or maybe a moose, rather than any deer. I'm beginning to wonder if the beast from across the street hadn't changed his mind about letting me survive witnessing his terrible majesty. 5th story. When the trees start waving, run. Our travel agent was right. The views in Canada's Northwest Territories were worth the hike. Becky, Rob, Sophie, and I followed a touristy path all the way up to Nahanni National Park Reserve, but after that, we decided to make a detour downriver. The route was given to us by a Canadian couple we met at a hostel just outside of Uranium City. They promised us we'd be the only people to see the remote trail in 100 years. If I'd known then where they were sending us, I'd have killed them both on the spot with my bare hands. Everything was fine this morning. We woke up and started buzzing about the camp like usual. Becky got a fire going while Rob started the coffee. Sophie and I took down our tent, then Becky and Rob's. We were all finished breakfast and ready to hit the trail 30 minutes after sunrise. Even in early summer, it can get cold in the Northwest Territories. The 4 of us were fine, though well-provisioned and prepared and experienced. The terrain in the Nahanni National Park was stunning. Massive red oak and paper birch stretched out into the sky, threatening to comb the clouds. Their roots often wove together through the dirt trails, hard tangles that tested our boots and our focus. The Nahanni River ran fast and quiet to the west, the wide water humming with life. There are places where the river dives over rocks. You can hear the falls approaching from far away through the summer silence. We followed the Nahanni into the deep valley that split a sharp, blue-white mountain ridge. The Nahanni Valley has an off-putting nickname, the Valley of the Headless Men, but we weren't planning on spending too much time down in the cut. Our local guides had drawn us a map that would supposedly lead us to a remote secondary valley nestled between Nahanni and a neighboring mountain. It was a small but beautiful place full of ice-fed streams and trout and lodgepole pines and soft green fields. Or so the couple in Uranium City told us. It took us most of the morning to find the start of the hidden path that led out from the valley. Rob was the first to notice the trampled brush that marked the start of the side trail. The big guy jumped up like a little kid and let out a whoop. "Over here, Jimmy," he shouted at me. "I think I found the yellow brick road." Becky giggled and hurried over. Where Rob was a bear of a man, his wife barely broke 5 feet even in boots. Sophie and I walked towards the trail together. The weather was fine and clear, but growing colder in the shadow of the valley. Rob took point leading us up the trail, his long oak walking stick thumping in time to whatever tuneless song he was humming. The path was narrow enough that we had to walk single file. Becky went next, snapping pictures every few minutes as we climbed towards the top of the valley. Finally, Sophie then I brought up the rear. The temperature continued to drop like a stone in a well as we walked. Long afternoon shadows stretched over and across us, clouds thickening in the sapphire sky until they were so gray and low we could almost reach up to run our fingers through the fibers. We hiked on for about an hour before the strangeness started. Becky and Sophie were debating the best way to build a fire when Sophie stopped in her tracks. "We've passed that tree before," she said, pointing off trail at a lightning-scarred oak. The 4 of us stood still for a moment. The wind was picking up again, causing the trees on either side of the trail to bend. "That tree does look familiar," I said. The oak was maybe 30 feet tall, bare-branched, and scorched in a line down the trunk. I don't think so," Rob said. "We've been climbing in pretty much a straight line. There's no way we looped around." "The lightning scar, though," Sophie murmured. "Lots of trees out here probably get hit during storms," Becky said. "Let's keep going. I bet we'll be over the nearest ridge in an hour, and then we can rest." We passed the lightning-struck oak twice more over the next 3 hours. The first time, Rob tried to laugh it off, saying we must be walking through the forest of lightning-loving trees. But the next time we came up on the oak, nobody was laughing. Becky went to examine the tree, confirming that it had the mark she'd scratched into it with her knife on the previous passing. "I don't understand," she said. "I checked the compass. We're constantly going west. How did we loop back in a circle?" "You think that couple back in town sent us down some kind of trick path?" Robbie asked. I pulled my collar tighter. The cold was almost a physical force by that point, drilling into every exposed slice of skin. Even worse was the constant wind. Trees ebbed and flowed with each gust. It was almost like they were waving. "We should head back," I suggested. "If we just retrace our steps, we'll exit out into the Nahanni Valley." Sophie looked up at the clouds, searching for the sun. "It'll be dark by the time we get down. We'll need to camp in the valley." "Lovely," muttered Rob. "But yeah, not many other options." "Throw it in reverse." "We're following you, Jimmy." I nodded and took a sip from my water pack. Then I set off, heading back the way we came down the path. It didn't make any sense. Once we turned around to head back towards the Nahanni River, we stopped passing the lightning tree. Instead, we began moving in a loop, passing the same unfamiliar terrain over and over every 15 or 20 minutes. It went like clockwork. The trail would dip, we'd walk by a pair of intertwined trees I didn't remember passing on the way up, then a barren patch with no vegetation, then a small pond that absolutely was not there the first time we climbed the path. "What in the hell is going on?" Becky asked, the tint of panic nipping at her words. She made us stop every 200 yards so she could check her compass. I watched the dial spin slowly, moving clockwise even though we were standing still. "We must have gone off the trail at some point," Rob said, shaking his own compass. "And maybe we're standing over some iron deposits or something that would mess with, magnetic fields." Sophie was crouched looking at the cold dirt. "We've literally been following our own tracks back towards the valley. We're still on the path." "We can't be," Becky snapped. We can't be." She finished in a whisper. I understood how she was feeling. My own grip on reality was starting to fray. The trees around us were even beginning to look unnatural. They bent almost in half whenever the freezing gusts came through, then fell back, their branches following in a sharp, wooden wake. Cloud cover had dropped to combine with a rising fog, leaving the whole forest in a thick mist that seemed to be closing in on the trail. "I'm tired," Becky said suddenly. "Guys, I'm exhausted. Can we rest?" Sophie and I shared a look, but Rob was already sliding off his pack. "Let's take 15 and just catch our breath," he said. Sophie licked her cracked lips. "It's going to be dark in maybe 2 hours. We should either keep moving or find a spot to camp." "No flatland anywhere I can see," I said. "Just this nasty ridge, heavy trees, that lake." "We shouldn't camp by the lake," Becky said. She was sitting on her pack. "There's something about the water, something wrong. Can't you smell it?" I shook my head and she sighed. "Just give me a few minutes to rest, and we can push on. Either we'll find the exit to the valley or maybe a good spot for the tents." Sophie and I looked around while Becky and Rob rested. We were tired too, but some feeling, made me wary of taking a break. The fog was heavy and cold. Just walking through it seemed to drain the little energy and heat I had left. Have you tried calling for help? Sophie asked me when we were a few steps off the trail, but still inside of the others. I nodded. 3 times now. I can't get any signal. We're going to have to find somewhere to camp soon, or we're going to freeze, Jimmy. I know. This wind. The trees were snapping back and forth faster now. At first, it was like they were waving a greeting, but now it felt like they were frantic. When Sophie and I got back on the path, it took us nearly a minute to shake Becky and Rob awake. Both had fallen asleep sitting on their packs. We can't stay here, Sophie said. I think we should go off the path and set up camp as soon as we hit any suitable space. The moment we left the trail, the ground turned on us. It was like walking through mud, even though the dirt was frozen stiff. The earth pulled at our boots, tripped us, seemed unwilling to let go each time we tried to take a step. We trudged through dense, misty forest. Even the branches and roots seemed to pull at us, to hold us. The 4 of us were all leaning against walking sticks when we reached the narrow creek. I can't go any farther, Becky said, slumping down.
I'm sorry.
I just can't. Sophie helped her remove her pack. It's okay. Here is probably as good a spot as any for the tents. I noticed that both girls had something wrong with their skin. It was cracked and gray, their faces rough as new leather. When I looked at Rob, I saw he had the same condition. I pulled my gloves off and noticed that my skin was also turning gray and brittle. We need to set up the tents, I said. The wind made it nearly impossible to roll out the fabric, and the frozen ground resisted the tent spikes. Sophie and I managed to make slow, brutal progress, but when I looked over at Rob and Becky in their nook between 2 trees, I saw they had stopped working. The couple sat together, holding each other, both asleep. Strangely, their skin was completely gray at this point, and their legs appeared to sink into the earth. A trick of the fog, I guessed. Sophie noticed where I was looking and moved to help our friends. Wait, I said, struggling to breathe. We need to finish the tent first, then help. Sophie bit her lip but nodded. Somehow we assembled the tent and both crawled inside. It was warmer inside, though the wind ripped and tore at our little nylon fortress. I'm so tired, Sophie told me, leaning against my shoulder. I'm so tired. Her skin was like Rob's and Becky's. I saw that she'd pulled off her gloves, and all of her fingers were merging together. Hey, stay awake, I begged, shaking Sophie. We can't sleep. Something terrible is Sophie? Sophie? It was no good. Nothing I did could get my wife to open her eyes. Her body was stiff and hard and cold. I lay there holding her for a long time. Why I had the energy to keep going that small bit extra, I'll never know. Eventually, after Sophie stopped breathing, I opened the tent flap to look out. It was difficult to see more than a few feet through the fog, but I saw enough of what remained of Rob and Becky to scream. Where my 2 friends should have been, a pair of entwined birch trees rose from the ground. Both trees still had human features in the knots and whorls, though sleeping faces complete with bits of clothes here and there. I closed the tent and fell back. I looked at Sophie. She was changing fast. Her skin was becoming like bark, her body stretching, neck elongating, legs pressing through the tent floor into the dirt. Sophie? I asked. The ruins of my wife did not answer. I'm watching her now, minute by minute, become less human, more of the forest. I feel the change happening to me, too. My joints are growing stiff, so I'm writing all of this down as quickly as I can. Once I'm done, I'll place my journal in a waterproof bag and drop it in the creek. Hopefully, the water will flow down into the Nahanni River and someone will find this last account of mine, of us. If you're reading this, I know you won't believe it. I wouldn't either, not before today. But it is the truth. Robert and Rebecca Astros. Sophie and James Harden. When people come to search for us, they won't find any bodies. Just 4 birch trees growing up through the tatters of a campsite. In the end, there wasn't any pain, at least. I'm going to drop this book in the creek, then I'm going to return. I'm going to hold Sophie close, and then I'm going to sleep. If you're ever exploring the Nahanni Valley, don't take any unmarked paths. Please, when you see the trees waving in the wind, know that it's not a greeting. It's a warning. So I found this journal in a thrift store in Toronto. It looks like it's really been through the ringer. Can anyone verify if there are any known dangers around the Nahanni Valley? Google makes it sound like the place is creepy AF, but I'd love to hear from a local or someone who has visited the area. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm. Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of Horror in Detail, the realm where the shadows whisper ancient secrets and nightmares come to life. I am your guide through the darkness, and on this channel, we delve into the spine-chilling world of Wendigo horror stories that will send shivers down your spine. First story, Wendigo, the Encounter. So I don't really know how to start this, so I'm just gonna spew out some stuff and hope it all makes sense because it sure as hell doesn't to me. Have any of you even encountered one before? If not, let me tell these things are not like how Google or any of pictures you find depicts them, at least not right away. Let's get into it. I'm from Canada and I live on a reserve that's about 30 minutes from any town, relatively close compared to other places I've been. Well, it's the end of December and just getting finished with holidays and spending it relatively alone, thanks COVID. I get a call from one of my friends. He wants to go hunting. Well, that's kind of a problem because I've never shot a gun or went hunting before. Pretty pathetic for a Native American if you ask me. But anyways, he tells me he just needs my eyes and another set of legs to help carry whatever he catches. So I agree, making one of the biggest mistakes I would come to regret. So he picks me up in his crappy old Ford truck he uses for hunting, tells me we are going deep into the bush, and we'll find a spot to camp along the way. So we drive about 20 minutes into the woods following what little road is left, and we get to a point where we have to continue on foot. We unload our gear and supplies and carry it till we find a nice clearing with room for everything. After we set up camp, we begin our trek into the woods, going farther than I had gone before. Saw a couple of bucks and rabbits, nothing too spectacular. So we keep looking because he wants the big daddy buck, and we come to this other clearing much larger than the one we are camping at, and something about this part of the woods just feels off. It had a heavy feeling to like the air was thick and just a disorienting aura about this place. But we hadn't caught anything yet, and we're getting hungry, so we spot a rabbit in the middle of this clearing. Buddy lines up the shot, and bam, we have dinner. So being the one without the gun, I go to get our little dinner in the middle of this clearing, and I notice something odd, that it's a perfect circle. No tree stumps, no sign that any human had made this gigantic circle. I also happened to notice what looked like claw marks on the trees surrounding the area. Buddy said it's from bears sharpening claws and marking territory, but the marks were so deep into the trees it seemed off. Anyways, it's dark out now, and we are back at our campsite eating and talking about how crazy this pandemic shit is. I also brought up the clearing we were at and how weird it felt to me. I wanted to know if he felt like that too, or if I was just exaggerating. My anxiety makes me do that sometimes. To which he said, yeah. He noticed the change in the air too and said it made him feel dizzy and worn out, but he also said it just could have been from the long day we had. So on that note, it was time for bed. We both slept in same tent. It's the middle of winter, and bundling up can only do so much, plus he was like a brother to me. It had to be around 1 a.m. when we both woke up to sound of the most horrible scream I'd ever heard. What that fuck was that? Was my first though. I'm guessing my friend was thinking the thing as he looked at me with fear on his face. I know because I was afraid too. So he grabs his gun, loads a round into the thing, and we just sit there for a while and listen. Now I know my friend is at least safe, he's got a gun, but I have nothing. Fear and my anxiety start getting the better of me, so I ask, "Where's the hatchet we used to split wood?" "Out there by the fire," he said, so I tell him I'm gonna open the tent, grab the hatchet, and when I jump in you seal the thing back up. I open the tent, and as fast as I can bolt to grab that hatchet. As I go to turn around with hatchet in hand, I'm quickly greeted by my friend shoving me down by the back of my neck. He put his finger up to his mouth to tell me to be quiet, and we listen. In the distance, I can hear the slow sound of crunching snow and a faint, high-pitched guttural growl. Now I'm in full panic mode. We don't even have to say anything to each, cause we both know our hunting trip was over and it was time to leave. All we had to do was make it to the truck in the dead of night. It sounded so easy. But it wasn't, and I knew it from the moment I heard, "I'm gonna fire a warning shot." Before I could even open my mouth to tell him, no, it was too late. The shot rang in the distance, and for a moment there was silence. Then we heard it, a scream so soul-piercing it felt like it lasted forever. It definitely echoed and lingered much more than this gunshot did. It was petrifying. I'd never heard such a haunting scream before, that I was literally frozen in fear. Then we could hear whatever made this scream was charging right for us, with the sound of crunching snow getting closer and closer. We looked at each other and just ran in the direction of the truck, frantically sprinting, calling out to each other to make sure the other hadn't fallen behind. "We're almost there," we kept telling each other as we are weaving through trees, making a beeline to the truck, trying to ignore the sound of this growl that sounds like it's right in my ear. But I can see the truck. We're gonna make it. We're getting out of here. As we come up to the truck, my friend makes it to his side and unlocks both passenger and driver side at the same time. As I open the door, he does too at the same time, and then he's gone in a flash of white. This thing had gotten him. Ran at him with such force that when it tackled him, it shook the truck side to side. I stood there in shock. I call out to him, but all I can hear are screams and a couple gunshots, and then dead silence again. I know in my heart that my friend is dead, and so am I if I don't get the fuck out of here. I go over to the driver's side and find the keys on the ground. He must have let them go when he got tackled. I hop and start the damn thing, whip it around in the direction I need to get out of here. Then I saw it. Skin as white as snow, completely hairless. Eyes that had sunken into its head made dark circles around eyes that were just as white as its skin. No nose, teeth so jagged and sharp shined with the color of blood, and its lips looked like they had been chewed off, so all you're staring at is teeth. Its body was so disproportioned, long, lanky limbs. This thing is blocking me from leaving, but I'm getting out of here no matter what. I floor it with the tires spinning. I shoot forward, and so does it, screaming that blood-curdling scream as it charges at me. Now I'm getting up close and personal as this thing lunges at the truck and bounces of the hood and over top of the truck. As I'm speeding away, I glance at the rear-view mirror and witness this thing get up and just stand there watching me drive off with its head tilted slightly. I knew I had just escaped death with the price of losing my friend. Second story. An extreme haunted house. The first horror film I ever watched was An American Werewolf in London. I remember the transformation scene vividly, and unlike my older cousin who was traumatized by it, I loved it, and it got me hooked on the genre. I eat up everything horror and do everything short of buying the Funkos, which in my opinion is a waste of money. Back when streaming wasn't a thing, I collected an entire wall full of DVDs dedicated to horror films. From classics to foreign to cheese. I couldn't get enough of being scared. I read that horror stimulates the primitive part of our brain that is hardly ever activated in modern times. Unlike our ancestors, we are on the top of the food chain and rarely have to worry about being eaten by saber-toothed tigers or being wiped out from the flu. Because of this, horror films, video games, and even things like roller coasters are used vicariously, so we experience the fear of nearly dying, but not actually being in any real danger. Haunted houses are a prime example of this. Every year during the Halloween season, these places become extremely competitive with each other, all trying to be scarier than the others. The problem is that people are sort of desensitized from horror, and it's not just from movies or television, but from the nightly news and social media feeds. Mass shootings, patricide, abduction, natural disasters, and so much more. However, for fans of extreme horror, this is a blessing. For people like me, we live for this kind of stuff, and will go out of their way to find ones that only allow you to enter if you sign a waiver. Over the years, I found a few like-minded people online and became real-life friends with them. We have a group chat where we share movie and book recommendations. We called ourselves the Gorehounds. While we were always communicating, it was during the Halloween season that we would share the scariest haunted houses to visit. Most of the extreme, haunted houses were not advertised to the public. Most of them were illegally set up to make it feel more dangerous, and the really good ones were set up in places that were already creepy and riddled with a sordid past. A hotel where a fire killed dozens of people. A warehouse where a serial killer tortured the homeless, etc. This year, a member of the group told us about a new place. A place that she claimed would be crowned the best of the haunted houses, Goose Creek Sanitarium. After a quick search online, I found that Goose Creek Sanitarium had a dark history. It was abandoned in the late 70s due to a fire, and since then it just sat there, gathering dust and mold. The most recent thing I could find on it was a short article from a small newspaper that said it had been recently purchased. Other than that, there was nothing. The drive there took a few hours, but we've driven more than that over the years in our search for the scariest place. Unfortunately, there was little to see on the way there, so most of the drive I slept. When I woke up, it was nearly dark, and the car was rocking on a dirt road that hasn't been maintained for decades. The trees that hugged the road and covered the sky like skeletal fingers looked perfect for a scary movie. Goose Creek Sanitarium was a large 5-story building that saw no upkeep in decades. Surrounding it was a black iron fence to keep its patients from getting away. Very little had to be done to make the place spookier. The people who put it up knew this and didn't want to ruin it with many decorations. To me, this made sense. After all, a little salt goes a long way when cooking, and too much will spoil the meal. The same is true with decorating a place that is already creepy. The line to get in only had a few people in it. Like us, they were horror connoisseurs. We knew some of them from other extreme haunted houses we visited over the years, and this time we invited some of them to be members in our group chat. Like those other places, we had to sign a waiver. This allowed the workers to grab us, pull hair, and more. Getting into the main building required us to walk through a garden that was overgrown with weeds and littered with broken statues of angels that were covered with moss from years of neglect. Like the rest of the place, not much had to be done in order to make it creepy. Before entering the building, one of the workers grabbed Renee, one of the founding members of the Gorehounds, and ran off with her on his shoulders. This caused everyone to laugh, including Renee, as she was being taken further away. "Bring her back when you're done with her," Aaron, Renee's boyfriend, called out while laughing. At the entrance to the building was a so-called tour guide, who was dressed like a ghoul who just crawled out of a grave. A man wearing a jacket and shorts asked why an extreme haunted house would need a tour guide, but the guide just smiled and said that everything would be explained later in the tour. He explained the history of the place as he led us through each of the rooms. Most of the rooms didn't have anyone jump out and grab us because they didn't require any. The history of the building was terrifying, so it did not need to resort to embellishment. Not only were the mentally ill treated like animals here, but Goose Creek Sanitarium also housed people with tuberculosis, and they were equally mistreated. Whenever someone died, they were brought to the basement's crematorium by being dropped down a dumbwaiter made for corpses. According to the guide, the smokestacks that were connected to the crematorium in the basement would have to be cleaned out every month because the remains would stick to the wall. That job was given to one of the other inmates because of how damaging it was to people's lungs. If someone died while doing it, they would simply be added to the chimney's ashes. While others in the group thought the story was bullshit, I believed every word of it because of the horrible things I discovered online about the place. After this introduction, we headed to the cells. As soon as we left the lobby, iron bars in the doorway dropped, preventing us from leaving that way. The sound of the heavy metallic clang was deafening and caused us all to nearly shit ourselves. The guide chuckled. When Goose Creek Sanitarium was first constructed, the biggest fear was that someone would escape. That is why there are bars in each of the doorways and windows. That wasn't in anything I read while doing my research on the place, but it sort of made sense. After all, this place used to house the worst criminals and lunatics the state had to offer. In the cells, people were reaching out to us on both sides of the hallway, moaning and screaming. Some pulled us towards them, and we would do our best to avoid their hands, or just slap them away. While this was going on, the guide told us about some of the famous murderers who once lived there. The most famous of them was Solomon Gideon, who killed 13 people in a 2-day span. He called Goose Creek Sanitarium home for 10 years before the mysterious fire that caused the place to close down allowed him to escape. Where he went is still a mystery. I could talk for days about Solomon Gideon, but that's a story for another day. While being told all of this, a man wearing a dirty surgical mask came out of one of the hallways, grabbed someone I didn't get the name of by the hair, and dragged him away. The man being dragged away tried to fight him off, but the masked man not only had the element of surprise, but was also very physically imposing. Because of this, no one stepped in to help. All we did was look on helplessly. We all signed up for this. As we left the cells, more bars fell, preventing us from leaving the way we came. Deeper into the bowels of the sanitarium, we came across what I assumed used to be the mess hall. When we walked in, it seemed to me that the inmates had taken control of the asylum. Hanging from the ceiling was wet meat hanging from hooks and cages. Inside the cages were people begging for our help. The guide spoke over their cries and told us more about the history of the place. How the doctors were known to perform experimental surgeries and procedures. When someone in the group asked if they meant frontal lobotomies, the guide smiled and said while those did happen in Goose Creek Sanitarium, there were far worse fates. Rooms were constructed with the sole purpose of driving insane men sane. The idea was that if something could make a sane man insane, it could have the opposite effect. This included flashing lights, prolonged darkness, sensory deprivation, being wet, cold, hot. The people who had to endure this were even starved, the guide said as we left. Again, more bars fell down preventing our escape, and I would be lying if I said that I wasn't scared by this. Our next stop was one of the operation rooms where blood was splattered around, making the place look and smell more like a charnel house than a hospital. I didn't think much of this. After all, it isn't uncommon for extreme haunted houses to use ground beef and the blood that comes with it as decoration. The guide told us to look around and that we would meet back up at surgery room 3 in 30 minutes. We stayed in small groups and wandered around a little, all the while having our hair and clothes pulled by people wanting to be freed. Their makeup is Hollywood level, Andrew said, pointing out someone who looked to have been a captive for weeks. She was so thin that I assumed that she was a recovering drug addict or a method actor, and her dirty white dress highlighted the fact that she was as pale as a ghost. The more we explored, the less we saw the other groups that were with us. Occasionally we heard screaming, but we couldn't be certain that it came from them, or the actors locked away in their cells, or tied to steel gurneys. After 20 or so minutes went by, I noticed that the guide was nowhere in sight. I was concerned about this, but the rest of the people in my group assumed it was just part of the show. He abandoned us so we would have to escape on our own, Aaron said as he started making his way back the way we came, forgetting about the iron bars. Making our way back to where we last saw the guide, we looked for an escape route. At the time we were relieved. After all, up to this point, it wasn't overly scary. Now that we were left to find our own way out, we felt that it was about to get good. We spread out to look for a way out, but kept close enough to each other so we could hear if one of us called out. After a while, I came across a dark hallway that had 6 different directions to go, including the way I came from. Calling out to the rest of the gore hounds, we met in the grand intersection of hallways. Some of us wondered why the hallway was designed like that, but Andrew was quick to scout ahead to find a way out. Before he could open the door at the end of the hallway he chose at random, one of the women from the other group barreled past that door and ran by us. She didn't even try to stop or to explain herself, and the look on her face was pure horror. Under usual circumstances, we would have followed her just as quickly, but we came here to get scared, so we went in the direction she came from. After all, we had to know what made her freak out like that. We couldn't see much in that dark room, but there was an echo and the floor was sticky. Somewhere close was the sound of shallow gasps. We had to feel around to navigate our way through. On the way we got separated. Made worse when some of the actors came into the room with night vision goggles and took some of our hands as if they were in our group and led us away from the others and the exit. By the time the few of us discovered that half of the gorehounds were no longer with the rest, we were in the next room, a surgery room made to host an audience. The smell of fresh blood was unmistakable. In the middle of the room was the body of one of the people in the other group. She was tied to the operating table, and the surgeon who appeared earlier in the cells was standing over her. Some of us freaked out when we saw this, but Debbie assured us that it was all part of the show, that we were looking at a dummy, and the person we met in line was a plant to make the experience feel real. As she said this, I inwardly applauded. We all had experienced extreme horror houses before, but we never came across anything like that before. In the distance, there was the sound of someone yelling orders in a bullhorn. "Stay where you are, don't come any closer," and more. There were even a few gunshots. We all froze, wondering if this was part of the show too. If it was, it didn't fit the rest of the experience. The surgeon aimed his scalpel at us and warned us not to move before running out the door towards the shooting. Naturally, I didn't listen and went to look out into the hallway. I thought this was all just part of the show. However, when the surgeon started stabbing the officers before getting gunned down, I knew it was real. After the raid and the police took everyone's statements, we were let go. They promised to do all they could to find Renee and the others that went missing, but after 2 years we don't have much hope in finding them alive. In the days that followed, details of what happened emerged. In the 10 days the haunted house was up, 36 people went missing and at least 14 were murdered. The man responsible for the haunted house was best friends with a shady prison warden. The two of them had a deal that the warden would supply prisoners to make the horror experience authentic for an unspecified amount of cash. Those acquired from the prison included 8 murderers and 10 violent offenders. The worst of it, though, was a known cult leader who would dine on the blood of his sacrifices and must have recruited the others. Why this person ever saw the light of day is a mystery to me. 7 of these people were killed in the raid. The rest are among the missing, including the man who paid off that warden. Aaron killed himself a few weeks after that night. I think he blamed himself for laughing as they took Renee. The Gorehounds broke up soon after that. Nothing officially. It's just that we no longer update each other on horror movies or other haunted houses. I sort of talk to Debbie, but never about anything horror-related. Most of the time when we hang out, we silently fish and or drink. I can't speak for the others, but I cannot bring myself to watch horror anymore and got rid of my horror collection. Third story. I bought a haunted television. I'm something of a collector. If it's strange, if it's cursed, if it's twisted, haunted, or tinged with the supernatural in any way, then I want it. I've been actively collecting for a few years now, so my house plays host to all sorts of unique artifacts. I've got everything from a book that drives readers insane, haven't got around to reading it yet, to a Dybbuk box, a real one, I swear, to a unicorn skull, bigger than you'd think. So many treasures to study and admire. But my recent favorite by far is the television. It was my friend Liza who sold the television to me, though she tried to talk me out of it. It wasn't even what I was originally there for. See, Liza's a collector and seller of obscure antiques and rare items, and in her work it's not uncommon for her to stumble on something right up my alley. Sometimes she saves these things for the Velvet Room auctions, but sometimes she'll save one special for me and ring me up to have a look. That Friday morning a few weeks ago, she left me a message about coming to see a vintage book of spells supposedly kept by Jack Parsons. I already have an entire bookcase of just spell books, but given that Parsons was an occultist of notoriety, I was intrigued by it for its historical significance. So I threw on some clothes, told the dog to keep an eye out while I was gone, and drove on over to Liza's. An hour later my truck was parked outside her unreasonably large house, the sort of Victorian Gothic monstrosity out in the countryside that you'd expect an antique collector to go gaga for. She opened the front door before I'd even made it to the porch steps and ushered me in with a bright smile. Her brown hair was done up in soft curls, and she wore the same ruby-red lipstick and midnight eyeliner that she always did to age up her baby-faced features a bit and look her 30 years. She says it helps clients take her more seriously. We hugged, caught up a bit. As usual, she had tea and cookies ready for me in her sitting room. We chatted and sipped on a vintage Narcissus, surrounded by Liza's numerous odds and ends, our conversation punctuated by the ticks of her 3 grandfather clocks. After catching up, Liza sent me to wash my hands and had the book waiting for me when I returned. I began inspecting it, taking mental notes of the quality of preservation and the added value of Parsons' handwritten notes in the margins. "So where'd you find this gem, Liz?" I asked as I thumbed through it. "Oh, I bought it off a collector upstate," she said. "It came in a bundle with a few other things. I really only wanted the seance table, but the seller insisted that it was to be sold with the other items." "Why? Is it all part of a set?" "Certainly not. None of it relates to each other at all. But the collector's in the process of selling his entire collection, and he's made it clear he's in a rush to do so. I get the sense he's selling in bundles just to get rid of things as quickly as possible." I looked up from the spell book, surprised. "He's selling his whole collection? That's pretty extreme. Is he moving out of the country or something?" Liza grinned wryly. "Well, he's a believer in the supernatural, like you. From what I gleaned in conversation, he got his hands on a few items that spooked him silly, and now he wants nothing to do with any of it." A little thrill ran through me. An item that could scare a man so badly he'd sell off his whole collection, no doubt years upon years worth of work, had to be something juicy. Were any of those spooky items included in the bundle you bought, by chance? I asked Liza, looking around. There was one included that he was complaining about. I put it here somewhere. There. Liza walked across the sitting room, heels clacking on the floor. Nestled between the aforementioned seance board and a potted Norfolk pine was a squat object draped in a sheet. Liza pulled the sheet off to reveal the television. It was an old, black, boxy model, the kind you might have had in the early 90s, and small enough to comfortably carry. A TV? I asked. Really? That scared him? Liza laughed. I had to do a bit of prying to get it out of him, but he claimed he could hear demons through it, or something like that, and insisted it can't be left on for long.
Immagine.
Voices from the other side reaching out through the TV. A quintessentially modern ghost tale. I think the poor guy got carried away with some whiskey while flicking through channels, is all. So you don't believe him? I don't. Liza shot me an amused look. But I'm guessing you do. Let's just say I'm curious. Curious enough that I'll buy it along with this, I said, closing the spell book. 5,000 for the book, and I'll throw in 1,000 for the TV. Liza's eyes went wide. AC, darling, I can't let you do that. The book? Sure. But the TV is junk. Believe me, I've had it sitting here a week and I haven't heard any demonic voices. I was going to take it to the dump tomorrow. Nevertheless, I want it. It's a waste of space. It barely even turns on. Still want it. For goodness sake, you ridiculous creature. If you really want the damn thing, at least let me give it to you free, Liza said, exasperated. I can't have you blowing $1,000 for nothing on my conscience. And if this is the real deal, I can't have cheating you out of its value on my conscience. I carefully set the book down on the table and pulled my checkbook out of my pocket. I ignored Liza's continued protests and wrote out a check for $6,000. Say whatever you want, Liz, but my mind's made up. This baby's coming home with me.
Asterisk. Midge.
I called out to my dog as I hauled the TV through the front door, with Parsons' wrapped book on top of it. I slammed the door shut behind me with my foot and called again. Midge, come down. Seconds later, I heard the staccato beats of Midge's paws bounding down the stairs as she ran to greet me. Midge is a mutt, mid-sized with soft yellow fur and the cutest curlicue tail you ever saw. That's not why I picked her out at the pound, though. What really makes Midge special is her left eye, milky white and blind. Over the last 2 years, it's served me as wonderfully as I hoped. It sees things before I do. Good girl, Midgie. I cooed down at her, carrying the TV into my study. She trotted by my side with her tail wagging. I got us something real neat from Liza today, and I'd like you to help me take a look if you don't mind. I set the TV down on my desk, sweeping aside old papers and journals. I put the new spell book with the rest in the library, then came back and plugged in the TV, feeling ready to burst with giddiness. The TV crackled to life, its thick glass screen filling with gray static. I turned the volume up high and stared at that little square of static with anticipation, and stared, and stared, and stared some more. It briefly occurred to me that I may indeed have just blown $1,000. Midge was behind me, idly sniffing around at some taxidermied specimens I had behind the study door. Midge.
Sì, mia.
I called her over, impatient. She hurried over and licked my palm. I crouched down next to her, scratching behind her ear as I pointed up at the TV. See anything? Midge's gaze followed my direction, her good eye and blind eye both fixed on the screen. A few seconds passed without her reacting. She blinked her good eye. Then she went dead still. She continued staring up at the screen, her lips curling up to bare her teeth as she let loose a low, ragged growl. The TV speakers sparked and fizzed, prompting her to growl louder. Her ears went back and she barked viciously up at the TV. I burst into a smile and scratched behind her ear again. I grabbed her a treat from the bag on my desk and gave it to her. Good girl, Midge. Very, very good girl. Now run on upstairs. Midge, protective though she may be, was only too happy to obey that command. She zoomed out of the study so fast you'd think she was the Flash. I stood up and grinned at the TV with a little wave. Howdy. Nothing but static. There's no use hiding. I leaned in closer. I know you're in there. How's about a little chat? Static. I heard you're the talkative type, so go on. Talk. I'd be very interested in what you have to say. I grabbed a nearby notebook and pen. Static. All right. Have it your way. You'll want to talk eventually. I shrugged with a sigh and turned to leave the room. I glanced back at it over my shoulder just before walking out. If there's anything you and I have in common, it's that we've both got all the time in the world.
Asterisk.
I left the study door open and the TV on the rest of the day, waiting for whatever was in there to reach out. All throughout the house, I could hear the faint crackle of static as I went about doing chores and working on projects. Midge didn't venture downstairs once. The sun went down. Once darkness fell in and around the house, I finally heard it. A single, raspy hello from the study. I grabbed my notebook and pen and ambled over, triumphant. I walked into the study and shut the door behind me. The study light was off, so the only light in the room came in the form of the TV's cold, blue-tinged glow. The air swelled with the relentless fizz of static. I stepped closer, squinting into the senseless visual noise that continued to play within the cramped confines of the TV screen. After a moment of staring, I saw a faint shape hidden in the static. The barest outlines of a head, a nose, a mouth. Ready to chat? I asked it. My own voice sounded alien among the sound of static. The head tilted. Who are you? Its voice sounded borderline feminine, yet hollow and discordant, like corrupted audio. Just a friendly collector and inquirer, I said, flipping the notebook open to scribble notes and observations. I would never be stupid enough to give this thing my name. The better question is, who are you? A demon? A ghost? The voice hesitated before answering. I'm a movie star. I paused in my writing. Pardon? I was in the movies, it said faintly, then with more conviction. Yes, I was in the movies. With all the power of a million eyes on me. That is indeed a lot of power. But I need a more specific detail to buy that claim. Like your name. It twitched. I don't remember. What a shame. What do you remember then? I remember the table. The five-pointed star carved into it to mirror the black sun. I remember the blood-tempered blade. I remember the television on and hooked to the camera, so I could catch the moment forever. I remember I wanted more. More of what? More of everything, of course. More roles in more films, better ones, more exposure. My name on more tongues and my eyes in more dreams, more knowledge. To know and be known is power. Re-IGHT. Think I'm getting the picture here. I grinned and tapped my pen against my chin. Toying with forces you thought you could control, fumbling the ritual. You wouldn't be the first. So what sacrifice did you try to get away with half-assing? The face contorted briefly into something hideous, its features screwing tightly toward the center before it smoothed itself back into neutrality. I was arrogant as you are once. I was foolish and small. Before I was in here. Where exactly is in here? I tapped the screen glass. The figure within recoiled. Come inside and see, it whispered. I chuckled and shook my head. That's no answer. How about hell? Is it hell? Hell is many places. Hell is far away and all around and very close. The mouth opened wide into a silent scream. The earth is just one small pocket. One pocket with its own rules. Those mewling writings of the Bible's hell are children's fairy tales beside what truly lies just beside your world. In some worlds all is flesh. In some, nothing is. In some, you breathe the dark in your lungs like water, always drowning but never dying. In some, you are the blood-raw fruit growing along the branch, hanging precariously by a vein, miles and miles high, waiting to be plucked. There are worlds of watching shadows and blinking eyes, worlds I cannot make you understand with mere words. They are pressing against the soft boundaries of yours, gnawing gently at the skin. You were frightened. Not at all. I continued writing down her words. I see it through the glass. Your heart is beating faster. The other I told was frightened too. So frightened he screamed himself hoarse by the 10th night. But you don't need to be frightened. Once you get used to the pain, it is beautiful. I'm not too proud to admit that something about the way it spoke unnerved me. Speaking to a spirit, or whatever this former human was now. I expected wrath, confusion, threats, incomprehensible wails. Yet the calm with which it spoke as it described all this felt out of place. Sincere. I can show you. I can show it all to you. I'd like to see. I glanced down at the TV controls. Do I have to switch channels or something? Come inside and see, it said. Or else I must come out to show you. Yeah, nice try, I snorted. How about you just show me from over there? I have told you your two choices. Hard pass on both. Let me show you. I want to show you. Then find another way. There is no other way. There is no easy way, it breathed. It is the lesson I have learned well. Nothing is given without something taken. But I swear to you, the sacrifice is always worth it. The pain is exquisite. I'll take your word for it. Look, if you won't show me anything from this other world, let's circle back to your life. How'd you get mixed up in occultism? When you got locked in during the ritual, did anything from the other side escape? Static. Oh, so we're back to the silent treatment? The mouth closed. Fine by me. Like I said earlier, we've got plenty of time. You just let me know when you feel like talking again. I snapped my notebook shut with a yawn and slipped it onto the desk beside the television. Been a long day. I for one am heading to bed. I'll swing back around in the morning to check up on you. Good night. I left the television on, the volume up, and the door open, in case it wanted or needed to call to me in the middle of the night. I then went upstairs to bed, the sound of static growing quieter behind me.
Asterisk.
At around 3 in the morning, I woke to the sound of Midge's low growls. I sat up groggily, barely out of the daze of sleep. Midge was on the foot of the bed with her back to me. Her hackles were raised and her ears pinned back as she growled at the open doorway. I rubbed my eyes and looked ahead. As far as I could see, there was only the darkness of the hallway wall. But there was also the sound of static, just a little louder than before. I went still. Midge's growls grew louder as she glared at the doorway. So too did the static. Then a little louder, and a little louder. A blue glow, so faint I very nearly couldn't see it, shined out of sight down the end of the hall, where the stairs would be. As the static continued to grow louder, the blue glow continued to grow brighter, and Midge's growling grew desperate and more frantic, her entire body trembling. Louder, brighter, louder, brighter, louder, brighter. And then it was standing in the doorway. I froze in place, my stomach lurching as I stared at what had escaped the TV. I trembled as badly as Midge. It was a faint, ever-shifting shape, all draped in static. There were the barest outlines of a head, a nose, a mouth. All else was impossible to describe. Anywhere my eyes settled on it, the image grew blurry and discombobulated. There was a constant visual flux that gave me the sense that it was not the thing before me that failed to be seen, but my own primitive eyes that could not process the sight. It moved closer, until it was inches from the foot of the bed. Behind it, flat blots of static writhed on the floor. "Let me show you," it breathed. "I want to show you." I snapped out of it then. I grabbed Midge and bolted out of bed as the thing lurched forward onto the bed, running around it into the hall. The hallway and stairs were peppered with those strange blots, and I did my best to avoid them as I ran downstairs to the front door. I threw it open and practically chucked Midge out. I swung it shut and locked myself in before she could dart back in after me. "Truck!" I yelled at her through the door. She whined for a second, but made for the truck bed when I repeated the command. By that time, a blue glow was already casting my shadow on the door. The thing from the TV dragged itself down the stairs toward me, looking as though every step it took was excruciatingly painful. I grabbed the closest thing to me, a boot from the shoe rack, and hurled it at the thing as hard as I could, hoping to throw it off balance. Instead, the boot sailed clean through the thing's center, disappearing into the static. Excellent, that did nothing. I cursed under my breath and dashed to the living room with my hunter in close pursuit. The static blots were everywhere there, pulsating. The sound was deafening, unbearable, a ceaseless crescendo of noise. The only thing I could think to do was get to the TV in the study. I had a wild hope that if I altered it somehow, whether that meant fiddling with the controls or unplugging it, that might be enough to sever whatever access the being had to this world. But those goddamn fucking blots. I had to weave and hop and hug the wall just to avoid them, slowing me down and making me easier prey for the thing that followed. I could hear its hollow breathing just behind me. My lungs heaved and my heart thundered as leaped over blot after blot, until finally I was at the threshold of the study. On the desk, the TV glowed blank and blue, but it seemed I was too slow. Before I could even step through the door frame, something came down on my left shoulder and held me in place. I turned my head instinctively to look and saw buzzing static where my shoulder should have been. An unspeakable cold washed over my arm, worse than if I'd sunk it bare into snow. I felt myself turned around to face a head, a nose, a mouth. It leaned in close enough to block out the sight of anything else. My eyes ached from trying to see it. "Let me show you." It shifted to hold my head in place. With my right hand, I grabbed the door frame. I thought maybe I could use it as leverage to pull myself out of the thing's grip, but even as I tensed to tighten my grip, the thing was already leaning in closer, until the world went dark and the cold washed over my head. And it was an unspeakable cold, the kind of cold born from nothingness, the kind of cold that occurs when all the atoms of the universe hang still in suspension, the void of interstitial space, and, pulsing in the pockets of infinity, there were worlds. My eyes did not fail me now. I could see impossibly far into whichever one I liked. As promised, I saw the lands of flesh, planet-sized organisms that writhed in the smoldering heat of black stars. I saw the dead worlds, flat and barren lands that stretched on forever into the dark. I saw the black, viscous oceans. I saw the living bodies that grew upon behemoth trees, agony-struck eyes staring up as they waited second by excruciating second. I saw the deep dreams and the uncoiling memories of the dead. I saw alien empires of gods. I saw you, as you will be, as you could be, as you shouldn't be. I was torn apart and fused back together, and torn and fused, on and on as my body screamed, and as I looked at it all. Everything that was mystery, that was forbidden, that was deranged and profane and indecipherable and bloody born and backward. Everything that was terrifying and exquisite was right there for me to see at my leisure. I could have stayed there forever, but I could still feel my hand gripping the doorframe. I tightened my grip on it, used it to pull myself backward, and I was back in the study, face to face with the creature. I was sick to my stomach, my head reeling from the intense cold and the visions, but I had just barely enough presence of mind to move. I turned and lunged for the TV, the thing behind me lurching to grab me again. I grabbed the TV with what little strength I still had and held it in front of me like a shield as the thing threw itself at me with a faint scream. The scream was muffled as the thing collided with the TV screen, halfway inside the TV. Catching on, I thrust the television further over the entity, forcing it back inside. I had to throw my entire body weight over the back of the TV to first fully engulf the entity, then to keep it trapped inside, holding the TV screen down on the study floor. The thing continued to scream and rage inside as I extended my leg and hooked my ankle around the television cord. I then yanked it from the outlet. The noise stopped. The TV went still. All was quiet and dark in my house again.
Asterisk.
So, lesson learned, I will not leave the television on overnight again. The blots that my otherworldly visitor trailed throughout the house are gone, though they left black spots on my carpet that will have to be steam cleaned out. Midge remains so freaked by the experience that she still won't even go near my regular TV. As for the haunted one, it still turns on and still shows static, though I have not seen the entity that inhabited it since that first night. Whether it's purposely hiding itself, or it's lost in some other world, I can only guess. I've been researching who it might have been when it was human. No leads so far. But despite everything, I count this as a win. I'm sure that with a little repair and experimentation, I'll be able to use that TV to see into those other worlds from a safe distance. I can't wait to see it all again. Once you get used to the pain, it is beautiful. Fourth story. Whistler or Wendigo in Georgia. Asterisk first post ever on Reddit. Been holding on to this story for a while, and after finding this sub, I felt you guys would be interested or have some input on what I could have seen. It's been almost 2 years, and I still can't get it out of my head. That whistle. Growing up in the mountains of North Georgia, camping and hiking were things me and my brother did so often it was second nature. So anytime Ryan and I had a break from school, we would head straight for the woods. We packed our gear, let our parents know where we were going, and that was that. No questions asked. We decided to camp about midways through Jack's River Trail in the Cayuga Wilderness, and it's a trail we knew fairly well as we had used to a few times before to practice long hikes. We arrived at the trailhead around lunchtime, parked the car, got our gear out, and headed into the woods. We passed a few hikers as moved along and asked them how the trail looked, and the answer was always the same: wet. Jack's River Trail probably crossed the river 50 times as it went along its 17-mile-plus journey, and with the colder temperatures of late fall settling in, it was harder for the trail to stay dry. We moved deeper into the trail and started to look for a place to make camp. This is where Ryan and I made our first mistake. You see, Ryan and I have this rule. We don't camp near people if at all possible. Call us paranoid, but the last thing we want is for someone to drag us out of our tents and into the woods never to be seen again. So we always camped a pretty decent ways off of the trail and in the area that wasn't popular with overnight camping. Roughly 2.5 hours or so, we found what we thought was the perfect place to set up for the 2 nights that we would be out. We came up to Horseshoe Bend and ventured about half a mile off the trail into a clearing and set up. We built a teepee fire lay for that night and pitched our tents on either side. After setting up and unloading, we decided to walk back to the trail and go exploring around some of many swimming holes Jack's River had to offer. This was during Thanksgiving break, and I remember being surprised at how few people were on the trail. Maybe it was the weather or the fact that this was early in the week, but there didn't seem to be anyone hiking, much less staying the night. Around 5 o'clock, Ryan and I headed back to camp to start our fire, make dinner, and settle in for the night. As soon as the sun began to set, the cold rushed in. We added more wood to the fire, sat close, and just enjoyed conversation. Ryan was 2 years behind me in school. I was a senior, and he was a sophomore, but growing up we had always been close. We always hung out in the same groups, played the same sports, had the same hobbies, etc. Around 9, we were settled comfortably around the fire. I had just texted our mom to let her know we were safe and getting ready for bed, and I remember we were talking about dreading going to our grandparents' house for Thanksgiving and having the same awkward conversations we had each year with family we only saw on holidays when things started to get strange. We were no stranger to sounds in the woods, and these woods were full of animals, from deer to black bears, and even the random wild boar. If you were in the woods enough, you learned to distinguish certain sounds, and what we were hearing I can only chalk up to as odd. What Ryan and I heard was what sounded like someone sneaking around slowly just out of eyesight. With an animal walking on 4 legs, you hear a tighter group of steps, but what we were hearing sound very distinct to what a human sounds like when walking slowly or trying to move without making much sound. I remember we both pulled out our flashlights and shone it in the direction we felt the sounds were coming from, but that is what was so weird. Whenever we would fix our lights on a spot, we thought the sound were coming from the location of the sound would suddenly change. It was as if there were multiple people walking around us. That's when the whistling started. At first I thought it was the wind, and I remember thinking maybe the wind is just throwing leaves around, and what we are hearing is nothing but the wilderness around us. Ryan looked at me and asked if I was hearing that. I didn't answer, and was trying to focus hard on each individual sound. 2 consecutive notes with roughly a 3 to 4 second gap, and then 2 more consecutive notes. Over and over again. Ryan kept asking if I heard that, and I put my finger to my lips, trying to keep him from talking. The fear I felt was incredible. My jaw was tight, my fist clenched, knowing I wasn't ready for whatever was out there, if it was anything at all. The whistling continued for what felt like forever, but thinking it through was maybe 5 minutes when Ryan finally yelled out into the darkness, "Hey! Quiet!" The whistling stopped. The crunching of the wood stopped. Nothing. I was pissed. I looked at Ryan with a, "What the hell?" look, and he shrugged his shoulders. "I had to do something," he said. I just shook my head. We sat there in silence for a few minutes when the woods erupted with noise. Something or someone was running in a circle around our campsite. The whistling came back. 2 consecutive notes with the same 3 to 4 second gap, and then 2 more consecutive notes. How could someone whistle this loudly without cracking while also running? I was done. I stood up, shining my flashlight in all directions, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever was screwing with us. Nothing. It felt close enough to touch, but we never saw a thing. That's when the movement stopped, but the whistling was still constant. It was so loud. Inhumanly loud. I looked at Ryan and told him to call the police. Now this is the part one will never forget. The part one never liked to talk about. While Ryan was on the phone with the dispatcher and telling them our location and what was going on, I stepped around the fire towards my tent. Inside my bag I had a 6-inch fixed blade that I always carried and thought I would feel a bit more comfortable with it in my hand more than just my flashlight. Yes, I went to unzip my tent, trying to keep my eyes toward the woods. I heard some movement directly in front of me. I swept my light up in front of me, and for maybe 2 seconds I saw it. Whatever this person or thing was, it was about 5 feet up in a tree. Everything about it was long. Its arms, legs, neck, fingers, everything. And it was fast. As soon as the light hit it launched backwards off of the tree. I heard it land, but it either jumped an impossible distance or landed in a thicket because I heard it but never saw. I don't think I have ever yelled so loud. I ran back to where Ryan was and sat down. He kept asking me what I saw, but I couldn't answer. I just kept thinking about what I saw. Maybe 10 minutes later, we saw a couple of flashlight beams coming through the woods, and about 3 guys came into view, asking if everything was okay. I settled a bit and started asking them if they had seen or heard anything. All they said was they heard a lot of movement and then heard my scream, and that's when they headed in our direction. I tried to explain what had happened without sounding crazy, but it didn't seem to work. One of the guys walked around a bit and came back and said he didn't see anything. Ryan told them that we called the police, and roughly 30 minutes later, a park ranger showed up. Ryan and I tried explaining everything to him, but he just chalked it up to either a curious animal or some campers trying to mess with us. Either way, Ryan and I decided we weren't staying the night. We packed our stuff up and walked out of the woods with the ranger. He took our statement and we got in our car and drove home. Ryan and I don't talk about what happened that night, but neither of us have been back to Jack's River Trail and will probably never go back. 5th story. The house on Haunted Street. The name on the sign was Haunted Street. I had always thought that was strange, but I wrote it off as a joke some developer had played back when the homes were first built. I'd known about the place all my life because that's the road my grandmother lived on, but we'd never spent the night, so I never really got a chance to put the name to the test. It was spring break and I was out of school for a week, so my parents decided that would be a great time to visit. I was in the 9th grade at the time and didn't have much else going on, so I was fine with it. It'd be nice to see old Grandma Gable again. Last time she saw me, I was half my height and age. She lived alone in that old house. I felt kinda sorry for her, but she had a bridge club she went to and kept herself busy with charity work. She was getting really old and we were starting to worry about her. My folks even toyed with the idea of moving in with her, so if there was an emergency, we'd be there to call for an ambulance. We arrived on a Monday night in a rainstorm. The road was bumpy and in disrepair, so my mom kept hitting potholes, causing the car to bounce up and down. Water blurred the view out the windows while blue flashes from the sky sent blinding shockwaves through the car. The thunder was deep and rolling. The mood in the car was odd and apprehensive as we rounded the corner and the headlights illuminated the street sign. Haunted Street. It felt like we were starting a cheesy B horror flick. Only myself, my mom, and Dad were the main characters. The house came into view through the downpour, its dim glow fading in through the storm. It was an old Victorian thing with 3 floors, a basement, and an attic. The attic was small and rose above the roof like a little tower on top. It had a large round window with lots of ornate designs. The windows on the lower floors were all lit a dim red from fabric curtains. Its appearance was reminiscent of the Bates house in Psycho. The developers must have had a strange sense of humor when they built this neighborhood. We got out and ran through the rain to her front door. She had a small foyer, so we just walked in as my mom called out for her. She came around and gave us all hugs and the usual. She sat us down in the living room and got us all dry towels and hot tea she had made. The interior had high ceilings and lots of bare wood. There were rugs on the floors and a creaky stairwell at the back of the living room. All the furniture was antique and ornate, like everything from the old world. There was a small graveyard out back where Grandma had buried all of her various pets over the years. She even had little headstones made for them with their names on them. It was sweet and sad at the same time. Gable was a strange old woman who had lived a mysterious and bizarre life for her time. She had traveled with a carnival as a fortune teller, managed a wax museum in Salem, and finally settled down with my grandfather, who had been a semi-famous spiritualist in the 1940s. Grandma Gable loved to get out her scrapbook and go through her photos with us and tell us all about the old days. It bored my father, but I enjoyed looking at the faded and aged black and white photos of people I didn't know, most of whom had long since passed. We moved to the dining room table, where she was going to give us the standard family history lesson. The display of old photographs spread across the table told the story of her travels with images of unusual and strange people. The bearded lady, a carnival barker, a lion tamer, and others sat contrasted by images of wax figures of the Queen and other notable historical figures. There were photos of Gable with her crystal ball and of Grandpa holding a seance. The figures in the pictures were all fascinating characters, but there was something off and disquieting about them that I couldn't put my finger on. As I sipped my Earl Grey tea, she told us we'd be having guests for the week. She was excited for me to meet some of her old friends. My mother looked confused and asked her who was coming, but Gable just smiled and told her it'll be a nice surprise. After the storm let up, we got our luggage out of the car and put them into the rooms we'd be sleeping in. My parents were going to take the room down the hall from Grandma on the ground floor, and I was given my pick of anywhere else in the house. For some reason, I thought the third floor would be fun, up away from the others with a view out the window that looked over the front yard and street below. The wooden stairs creaked and groaned as I ascended. I wondered how long it had been since the wood had endured the weight of a human body. At Gable's age, it was unlikely she'd ventured up them in some time. The second floor was dark and quiet. I peered down the hallway at the row of doors. A sense of some presence there arose within me, followed by a chill and mild fear. I wanted to go check to make sure the rooms were empty, but my apprehension held me back in an uncomfortable way, so I continued up to the third floor, where I decided to spend the night. I chose a room to the front left side of the house, if you were looking at it from the street. There was a bathroom that adjoined the rear left side room and two more rooms across the hall which also shared a bathroom. At the back of the hallway was an iron spiral staircase that led to the attic. Both floors had deep red plush carpeting and framed black and white photos of people hanging on the walls. Some of them I recognized from the photos Gable had shown us. The hallway was lit by a small chandelier, and the bedroom used a few Tiffany-style lamps. The wood beneath the carpet creaked and bowed as I walked across it, making me wonder if choosing the third floor on such an old house had been a mistake. I tested the bed, and it seemed solid and secure on the floor. I decided I probably wouldn't fall through if I sat on it, took the risk, and found to my relief that it was safe. It was late, and so I climbed under the covers and drifted off to sleep. I woke sometime in the night to the sound of raindrops bluntly tapping on the window glass. I could reach the curtains without getting up, and so I pulled them back and watched the watery spectacle backlit from the streetlight below. The light rain was calming with its muffled tones and distant thunder. I was cozy under the covers and glad to be out of the wet, chilly night air. I glanced towards the back wall in the room and watched the shadow of the water on the window draining downward, interrupted by light splashes of new raindrops strikes against the glass. It painted the wall with a dreary display that seemed like a psychedelic movie without the vivid colors, as if watched on an old black and white TV. There, in this display of light and shadow, the moving fluid lines made images when combined with the ornate pattern of the wallpaper. I could see faces there, long and twisted, morphing, laughing maniacally, staring right at me from the wall as if the shadows somehow were aware of my presence. I knew it was mere illusion, a coincidence of patterns on the wall and moving shadows of the rain on the window, but it was unnerving just the same. The faces moved as the water flowed, causing a menacing animation. But why only faces? Shouldn't the shadows take on a variety of formations? Then I saw it. One of these faces looked like a man I'd seen in Grandma Gable's photo collection. He had a thin mustache and deep-set eyes with short, slicked back, dark hair, parted to one side. He seemed to display an evil grin when I recognized him, as if he were reading my mind. Just out of a perverse curiosity, I thought to myself that if he really were reading my mind somehow, I asked him to nod. Just then some wind kicked up and several gusts blew the running water on the window up and down, causing the shadow to nod and laugh. This freaked me out so much I sat up in bed, turned on the light, and closed the curtain. For a few minutes I just sat there still. I breathed deep and listened. The house was quiet. I looked around the room at everything. I was alone. Nothing seemed odd about the room at all. I convinced myself that it had just been a strange coincidence. It had to have been. I went back to sleep. This time I left the light on. The next morning my mom rapped on the door. I called out, and she said breakfast would be ready in a few minutes. I sat up and opened the curtain. The sun wasn't fully up yet, and the sky was a deep medium blue. There were a few birds chirping in the distance somewhere. Things seemed normal. I walked over to the bathroom door and opened it, hoping the plumbing was in adequate condition for a shower. I stopped, dumbfounded. There was a man in trousers and a sleeveless t-shirt, leaned over gazing at himself in the mirror whilst shaving his face. He did not turn to look at me, as if he hadn't noticed the door opening. I thought it must have been one of Gable's friends she had said were coming over. The fact that he was shaving implied he had spent the night, or been driving all night. I decided not to startle him lest he cut himself in the moment, so I gently closed the door. I wasn't sure if there might be other guests in the other rooms, so I just made myself as presentable as I could and headed down for breakfast instead of taking the risk of disturbing them to use one of the other showers. Halfway through breakfast, the man still hadn't come down. I asked Gable about him, but she said no other guests had arrived yet. The four of us were the only ones in the house, she said. I thought she was trying to be spooky and play a little joke, so I let it go. After eating, I went back upstairs to check. I knocked on the door to the bathroom and called out to the man. There was no answer, so I opened the door. The room was dark and empty. I turned on the light. The sink and bathtub were bone dry. The whole room was as if no one had been in there for quite a while. I had seen moisture on the mirror earlier, but there was no sign of it at all. In fact, the mirror was dusty. The door that led into the other bedroom was slightly ajar. There didn't seem to be any light on in there. I knocked on it, and again called out to the man in case I was just losing it. I said out loud that I was opening the door, then slowly pulled the door open, revealing a dark and empty room. The bed was made. There were no bags or luggage to be seen. No sign of the man at all. I checked the other two rooms on the third floor as well, and they were both empty. I wasn't ready to believe in the disappearing man just yet, but I was creeped out enough to use the shower on the ground floor where my family was nearby. I decided to check the rest of the house out after lunch. I asked Gable if any of her expected guests had shown up while I was in the shower. I didn't want to walk in on anyone who may have occupied a room during that time, however brief. She said they hadn't. I quickly checked all the rooms on the ground floor. My parents' room had my father in it. My mom was coming out of the ground floor bathroom as I passed. I glanced inside Gable's room. No one was in there. I searched the whole floor, including the kitchen. I even checked all the closets. No one else was on the ground floor other than my parents and my grandma. The second floor was still dark and foreboding. I slowly walked along the hallway there, eyeing each picture on the wall as I passed. At the far end of the hallway were 4 empty frames up on the wall. 2 on each side of the hallway. The bedrooms were laid out the same way as on the third floor, with 2 sets of rooms on either side of the hallway connected by a shared bathroom. None of them had anyone inside. I was sure the man must be hiding in the attic. He must have been a squatter, living there without Grandma Gable's knowledge or permission. She never went upstairs anymore, I thought. She couldn't climb the stairs at her age. That has to be it. He's a squatter. I ascended the spiral staircase cautiously and slowly entered the attic. The only light up there was coming from the round window. It dimly lit the room but failed to illuminate the dark edges on either side. And in those spaces was clutter, boxes and papers. I could see the edges in dim black and shades of gray. There was enough room for a body to be lying in the dark there. I scanned the blackness with eyes wide open and straining to see. I tried the overhead light, but it did not turn on. I took a step closer and noticed a box full of crumpled paper. In the gloomy light, I thought I could make out something there. I couldn't tell if it was more clutter in the box or some fingers sticking up. Whatever they were solidly still. I took another step towards it to make sure. Just more clutter, I thought. Then it lifted up and rotated over as if it were a hand connected to an arm somewhere in the black. My heart felt a punch, and I flailed backwards, reeling in terror. I stumbled down the stair, calling out for my father. Within 10 minutes, we were both back up there with a flashlight and a baseball bat. No one was there. I found the box, and all it had inside it was some packing paper and party streamers. My father told me I was freaking myself out, and that I should take a bedroom on the ground floor with the rest of the family. He researched the entire house with me to set my mind at ease. When we were both satisfied that no one was there, I packed my belongings and moved into the room closest to the stairwell on the ground floor, just up the halfway from my parents and Gable. I felt both confused and embarrassed. I knew I'd seen these things. At dinner, my grandma told me she had a surprise for me. She wasn't going to tell me, but in light of my needing a bit of cheering up, she said, she decided to break the news early. She'd left me the house in her will. I'd almost thought it was a joke. After we ate, I went out back to sneak in a cigarette in Gable's pet cemetery. The air was cool as the sun glowed through the cloud cover on the horizon. The little gravestones looked lonely, and for a moment I wished I'd spent more time with Grandma over the years, so I'd have some fond memories of the little creatures. One stone had a depiction on it of the doggy that I'd presumed was buried there. Little white thing with black spots and one big black spot around his right eye. Just then I heard a scratching on the rear door of the house. I looked up, and there was that very dog. He tilted his head to one side as he looked at me. Then he turned around and seemed to disappear into a crack in the wood. It was as if he stepped into it. The crack was no wider than a few centimeters, yet the dog slipped into it with ease. At this point, I was convinced I was having full-blown hallucinations. I went back inside to talk to my father about it, but Gable said they'd gone to bed early. That sounded like a good idea to me, so I told her I wasn't feeling well, and I was going to do the same. I woke again in the middle of the night to the sound of someone coming down the stairs, pounding their feet on each step. I thought maybe Grandma was falling or something, so I quickly went out to the foot of the stairwell, where I saw nothing. No one else got up. I found it hard to believe they hadn't heard it. I stood there for a minute and listened, but the sound did not return. I stared up the stairwell and found myself afraid to climb it. I knew I should check to see if Grandma had gone up there and needed help, but I was reluctant to do it. Eventually, I forced myself to go up after retrieving the flashlight my father had used earlier. It shone a circle of light on the steps as I ascended. On the second floor, I had the impulse to look at the pictures again. When I got to the empty frames at the end of the hall, I found to my horror that two of them now had pictures in them. One was a black and white picture of my father, and the other was of my mother. Things were getting too weird for me. I went back to bed determined to tell my parents that I wanted to go home the next day. Morning came, and at breakfast Gable sat at the table alone. She said my parents were sleeping in. Going to bed early was out of character for them, but sleeping in was just plain a lie. I didn't know what was going on, but I was going to find out. I ran to their room and opened the door. They were not there. I ran back to scold Grandma and demand answers, but she was no longer at the kitchen table. I scoured the house searching, but all three of them were gone. However, on the second floor, another blank frame now had a photo in it. Just like the others, it was a black and white picture which looked like it had been taken in the years prior to World War II. It was a picture of Gable. I looked at the last empty frame on the wall, and I knew it was meant for me. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm.